I love
That's
that
my
video.
daughter. I'm joking.
Hello, my family. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Saturday Revolutionary Blackout Live. I am joined with my amazing Revolutionary Blackout sister, Josana. And before you guys start, because people always want to say this stuff, did, did they really brainwash that girl and have her repeat anti-capitalist propaganda? You goddamn right. We need to brainwash all our kids to be anti-capitalist. Yeah, I said it. And what our country say, what mainstream liberals would say, they say you can't indoctrinate a child with your political belief. You indoctrinating a child. And let me tell you guys something. If we do not get to our kids first with anti-capitalist, socialist information, they will get to them first. They're gonna get to them first. So that video is very based.
Well,
Very
Nick,
based.
for what you just said, we were just having this conversation, right? I've never been a liberal. I've never been.
Yeah, I can't. I wish.
And my comrades, brothers and sisters, and binary folks, there are my also relatives. In the US, they always like, oh, I used to be a liberal. Oh, I used to be a socialist and then a migrant. Like, no, you are poor. You should be radicalized from birth because you need to understand that somebody's doing something against you. And that's why you are in that condition. So, yeah, like I wish everybody
See,
in America was just like that child.
I was always against authority. Like that's what that would led me down to my eventual political beliefs. But Josana, you have no idea how heavy the propaganda they hit you from day one. There are grown ass men, 70-year-old black men I have talked to that still believe in capitalist propaganda. Like it's like I feel better when I see older people who are still like caught by U.S. propaganda. Kind of like, well, at least I got out of it before I was 30, right? I used to consider myself. I consider myself radical because I used to believe in stuff like, yeah, I think we should have gay marriage, right? Because remember, guys, I live in the red state. I live in a conservative area. So I remember my very first radical position I ever took was, you know what? I think gay people should get married. That was when I was like 10 years old. And I was like, yeah, I'm a radical. And I was like, yeah, I think we should have legalized marijuana. I was like, yeah, I'm radical, right? I didn't even know how far to the right the Overton window in this country was. Because Josana, when you grow up here, you think this shit normal. You think this wage exploitation is normal. You think people going broke because they don't have health care is normal. You see a ton of homeless people, you think that's normal. Then you see how the rest of the actual civilized society lives like, right? Where China essentially reduced homelessness. China, Japan essentially reduced homelessness. So Cuba reduced homelessness. DPRK reduced homelessness. Literacy rates went through the roof because of people education system. People get free health care. Well, I remember when I first heard people got free health care, I'm like, what? What? So you go in other countries, you just go to the doctor and you're not in debt. I heard that stuff like that's
How
crazy.
about you graduate? You stay 4 years. It's different from here. You stay 4 years in college, okay? So university, like your own degree, I am graduate in fine arts. But then if I want a master's, I have to go 2 more years. But that's all for free. That's all for freaking free. Of course, there are difficult points and we fight for them to change, but you can study for 4 years. You never have to pay a dollar, and you graduate, and you're not in that. You start your adult life from zero,
So guys,
not from minus 400,000, which is
I'm
great, right?
I'm imploring you guys. Yeah, and those same people, yeah, those same people will indoctrinate these kids with religion, right? And I always say, yo, teach your kids socialism young, right? And then people are like, well, you're just indoctrinating your kid. No, if you don't do it, they will. if we are here with so much propaganda, there's so much bullshit. If you do not teach your kids the way of the world, they are going to be confused. And this is something I wish I had radical teachers. I had to learn this shit myself, right? I didn't have like mentors, none of that shit. Like I learned this, and then I seeked out people that think the way I do. Why do you guys think? Because it's something that was like told to our like the last generation. Oh, You can't get your kids into politics, right? Why you guys think so many parents of Black Panthers, their kids become liberals? Like Kamala Harris's father was a Marxist. Pete Buttigieg's father was a Marxist. That was Dr. Cornel West famously said. I don't know Pete Buttigieg's dad that well, but he talked about it before. His dad was really anti-capitalist, radical. Then his son turned to a neoliberal. That happens when you don't talk about politics with your kids, because someone's gonna indoctrinate them. It might as well be you, right?
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, I'm seeing top 10 comments say, and I agree with them. It's not free. You have to pay taxes. Well, yes, but at least my taxes are coming back as services because I'm investing. And to be quite honest, you only have to pay taxes if you are actually working and above the line of poverty. That's one of the reasons why Lula was like,
Yeah, I mean, I and the thing is that's the kind of dissidence that you can't even really explain. I can't explain why I used to think like I'm like, okay, you pay taxes, and I guess taxes go towards society. What is better to use your taxes for than healthcare? Like I can't think of anything that's more secure than that. We pay a shit ton of taxes, and most people are okay with this system. You pay taxes, and then you get social services. You get the social contract, the security, and the safety you need in exchange for that. Every single society agree that's a good idea, right? But in this country, we decide, oh, we're gonna pay a shit ton of taxes so we can have 800 military bases, so we can give corporate bailouts to the richest people in this country, instead of having healthcare for people, instead of solving homelessness. I wouldn't mind paying taxes to solve homelessness. I wouldn't mind paying taxes to give people health care. To me, the idea that you wouldn't want to pay taxes to give people health care and housing, that would, you cannot say you're patriotic. You can't say you love your neighbor if you really have that belief. The problem and the reason why people don't like taxes in this society, because they know, even people who like this country, they like, I hate taxes. We hate taxes. The reason why they wouldn't hate taxes is because we all know it goes to bullshit. We all know our taxes go to the police and the military. We all know the taxes is pretty much just shifted to the oligarchs that paid off the politicians, right? So that's why there's this disdain towards taxes, because everyone knows it's bullshit. So if we all knew that our taxes, like that 40% of your income or whatever, it going toward taking care of your community, most people wouldn't care, right? On top of the fact that we already pay these taxes. For the person who said this isn't free, yeah, every person knows this. So we either pay the private tax that go to big pharma and the health insurance companies that we pay right now, or we literally just have a public pool that decreases the cost. You will always have a form of central planning. But under capitalism, the people who are in charge of central planning are the people who control the capital. Now, if you control all the capital and you're on the top of society and you don't really care about the best interest of society, you only care about maximizing profits, your central planning will not be for the good of the community and for the people at large. But if you have a central planning that is based on communism, a dictatorship of the proletariat, the dictatorship of the proletariat, by the definition, will have the best for the community in mind. That's why the most democratic system, because we decide how the central planning is done. And since we decide how the central planning is done, the society will be better off. This is why we will have cheaper healthcare, because we won't have a middleman that's jacking up the prices. This is why we have a better education system, because we have a vested interest in educating our kids. Instead of having our system, Josana, is they fund education based on income taxes. So do you know what that means? The people who are the most wealthiest get the best schools. Our school was shit.
What? No, wait.
Yes.
Wait.
Yes. Do you know that? I know. Josana is our Brazilian friend. She speaks 4 languages. She's new here. She's our outsider perspective. So do you know that the wealthier the neighborhood is, the more the schools will be property taxes. To correct myself. Thank you for the correction. Property taxes. So who has the highest amount of property value? The rich. So if you're in a rich neighborhood and you're paying property taxes, your education will be funded more than people like me who the property is lower.
Oh, oh. Like, Nick, this idea just occurred to me. We're going to do this on RBN. I have this project, How to Be an American. So I'll have you guys come and blow my mind because, like, every single day, you blow my mind with a fact. And I'm like, but how? How can that be flying like that? Free bird, like, rah, flying. Like, what the heck? What? Like, your country is telling you on your face, bitch, we classist and you're poor. So get over it. Work harder.
They've been waging an active, and I'm being very conservative here, just for simplicity, right? They've been waging an active class war since the 80s. You can make the argument they always have, but let's just keep it simple, right? Ever since the Reagan era, there's been an unapologetic, out in the open class war that has been waged on the American people. And that has been shown by income inequality that has spiked since then. So I have no idea why the American people are not in the streets. That is it's shocking to me because I used to believe in a lot of propaganda until I started decolonizing my mind. But as soon as I learned about stuff like that, that's all it took. Like when I hear about student lunch debt, that's all it took for me to be like, all right, I'm done. Let's find a way to dismantle this system. When I learned that other people had health care, when I was learning what we did to other countries, to me, that's all it takes, right?
I am mesmerized because like when they came, I'm always gonna bring my perspective. Sorry if that bothers you guys. I'm just gonna say things so then I can just like whatever. I'm not gonna justify myself either. But when they came to us, the United States, and said, you cannot go with the USSR. We're going, Cuba's free now, so we are going to militarize the shit out of you and kill people. So you guys sit quiet. They did it, and people went to the streets. You know, like artists, like actors in a play. The play was stopped. The cops invaded the theater, and these actors, they were made, like most women, they were made to run naked around the block with gunpoint at them, and they didn't give up. They came back the day after and they did the play again, and they was stopped, and they were beaten up to almost death, and they didn't give up, and they came back a week later after they were almost healed, and they did the play again, and they were exiled because by then they were gathering support from the community, so the cops could not just arrest and kill them. They got exiled because it would look really bad. The reason why I tell these stories is because y'all need to know that what your country does to y'all, they do to us too, the foreigners, the outsiders. But we've got to start radicalizing ourselves in our little lives. We're not going to start a revolution with 100,000 people tomorrow in the streets. The US should do that though, but we won't. But we need to. I don't know, Nick. Sorry. I don't understand. I don't understand.
The reason, and another reason, because I think I'm gonna shift to the main topic now. Another reason why there's so many people who are still confused, still going along with this capitalist imperialist system instead of revolting, is because of the sheep herders, the weak United States left. The lack of revolutionary discipline that we have is led to them is because they led us off a cliff. Bernie Sanders, a lot of the progressives, they take otherwise anti-establishment energy and they funnel it back to the Democratic Party. What we have as a left is straight up embarrassing, right? And Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the squad, they have their supporters so whipped that they don't even feel the need to give an explanation on why they voted for the $40 billion in Ukraine aid. That is something that should immediately disqualify them in any conversations about them being an ally, on top of everything else. So before we start this segment, and Josana always tells me this all the time, like it's 100% fair to criticize Lula. Lula has some improvements that he could do as well, right? But I want to show you guys the state of the United States left, to the point where if you look at where Lula stands on these issues, And when you see how the squad and Bernie Sanders get these things completely wrong, you can see why the United States left is in the state that it is right now. And when I say that I view someone on the left if they are anti-capitalist and if they are anti-imperialist, we don't even get that from the squad and Bernie Sanders. So let's go to the first bullet point, the one I just mentioned. Anyone who believes Bernie Sanders and the squad are on our side after siding with NATO, an offensive imperialist force that has spent a lot of its resources crushing the left. Bernie Sanders and the squad joined with NATO. Now, this is what you guys know what Lula's position is? I'm gonna show you guys Lula. And now compare Bernie Sanders voting for $40 billion to Ukraine and essentially repeating U.S. empire talking points. And this is how every single progressive who had the balls to talk about this has presented this issue. Meanwhile, look at how RBN and our allies have been covering this issue, even compared to the boutique leftists. There are so many boutique left, like Bosch, like the Majority Report, like TYT. Like Cenk Uygur said, we need to fund this proxy war more. He was like, think about the gay people in Russia. Think about the women. So we came along. We're like, guys, let me explain to you guys the black radical position. And this position is not hard to take. It is very basic anti-imperialism, which identifies imperialism as a giant economic order that must be opposed. Once again, Lula is not perfect, but I wish we could have a left that is at least where Lula is at. If we had a left where Lula is at, then I'm like, okay, let's push them, let's fight, let's try to get them on our side. Bernie Sanders, AOC, and squad and them is nowhere near that. And by the time this video is done, you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about.
But that's not the problem. Is like, if Lula was born and raised in the USA, he would probably be a sellout as well. In my perspective, you know me, Nick, you know how radical I am, how far left from Lula I am, right? Yep. So like, I criticize Lula every day, but to be quite honest, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get my ass to the embassy in October and vote for him, because in my country, one person, one vote. So one unity, 1 point. Okay? Another thing, I want to have the right to be opposition to Lula. I want to have the right to sit here and tell you, Nick, this bitch is doing this and that. I hate his ass. I want to be able to do that. Because in dictatorial governments, we do not have the right to do that. With a fascist dictator like Bolsonaro, people are dying. Marielle Franco died. It's clear. And I get too passionate because Marielle is an entity. With Marielle Franco, a black queer woman from the slums. And we're going to use favela because favela is a bit different from slums. She was a congresswoman in Rio de Janeiro. Her last speech, the day she died, is facing her assassin. Bolsonaro was the person that ordered the murder of her. And nothing happened to him. Everybody knows in the country, and everybody's quiet about it. So, to be quite honest, no, Lula needs to be my candidate and my hero, my daddy. He needs to be way far left than what he is right now. But he can be my uncle, because he can be my tio, because I actually like to have the right to be free, really free. Not risking my life because I'm sitting on YouTube and talking, not having to leave the YouTube stream to go to fucking work like a fucking slave. No, that's no freedom in that. Just so I can sit here and be like, oh, I read this and that, and this is my point of view. Yo, in the USA, you love to see yourselves as the brain of the world because that's all you have. You need to be more heartful because you've been given nothing and you've been accepting it.
And what Josana laid out in terms of this is what I was saying as well. Like, if we have someone like Lula, you can push like, yeah, we gotta continue to call him out, and we gotta challenge him every step of the way. Even if, and this is the debate that we've been having. Like, should we have a leader in the movement or should we have a leaderless movement? Okay, if we do have a leader in the movement, we gotta be smart. We gotta be wise in how we have a leader in the movement. So when we represent the movement itself, we like, yeah, we got this guy who represents these ideas. The idea itself is bigger than the movement, right? And then if Lula strays, if there's any things that we disagree on, like there are a lot of people on the left in Brazil, and maybe Josiah can speak on it more. Lula get challenged a lot on his climate proposals, right? Because Lula is more of a drill kind of person. Like there's a disagreement between a lot of leftists and Lula on that, and that's something we got to challenge him on. But this is my thing: the people who say, "Oh, we got to push Bernie in the squad," they are too far gone. What I mean by that, if you're an imperialist, if you're apologizing for the U.S. empire capitalist system, you are too far gone. There's too much work to be done there. So if you're someone like Lula and you're at least anti-imperialist, if you're at least anti-U.S. empire, like Bolsonaro, and you can always correct me if I'm wrong here, but Bolsonaro was supporting the coup in Venezuela. He was a big supporter of Juan Guaido, and he sent mercenary death squads that launched.
Bolsonaro was baptized in Israel.
I didn't know that.
And
I didn't know
won
that.
the election. He won the election right after.
So
he went to Israel to be baptized, a Zionist.
So Bolsonaro supports Juan Guaido. And Lula is famous, and he recently gave a speech where he criticized the United States and the hypocrisy of the West. Where he was like, oh, you guys are saying that Russia is not a democracy. You guys are talking about country sovereignty, but you get in the way of Venezuela and their sovereignty and knowing Juan Guaido. So, and now, once again, we comparing the issues here. Compare that to AOC literally following Juan Guaido. And then she says, I'm going to defer this issue to caucus leadership. So that's a very smart, like, political thing by AOC, because when she says that, she's literally saying she supports the U.S. empire overthrowing Venezuela, but she said, I defer to caucus leadership, so she doesn't say it outright. So when you say you defer to caucus leadership is Nancy Pelosi. So you're saying you agree with the empire.
Mm-hmm,
you see how slick she is? That was her way of saying that she supports Juan Guaido without actually saying it. Because she was asked about it, she was like, "Oh, well, I defer to caucus leadership." If she was being really honest, she would say, "Yo, I do support Juan Guaido." She follows him on Twitter, and she supports Nancy Pelosi's position, which is overthrowing Venezuela, right? I'm gonna get to that comment here after I finish thought, but you see the difference because Bernie Sanders quiet on that issue. Yeah. If anything, his neutrality shows his support. Like he never. Bernie and AOC in the squad, they all for it. But Lula has been actively calling that out. So let me read this comment, and then you can comment on it, Josana, as well. Lula needs to purge every corrupt right wing within the Brazilian government as well as the Brazilian military, so another coup doesn't happen again. Josana, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I just want to say that I don't agree with that. I agree with having the right to do so, but I don't think this is the idea that I want to deconstruct in the head of my fellow relatives from the North, because we want you in that Pan-American bus. We need to deconstruct the idea that one man is going to go in there and save everybody. We need to believe and support that man, hold that man accountable, work with them, work against them. It's an environment, it's a society, it's a group, it's a community. To coexist is not the work of one. Get the idea of the white Jesus out of your head. White Christianity condenses us in a system that is dominant and makes us think that we are powerless because we depend on the hero to do so. It's not just, I'm going to vote for him and sit here and be like, yeah, good. I'm going to vote for him and hold his ass accountable every single day. I will be the voice he hates the most.
Yeah. That's how it should be done. Like, people like, I remember the progressive people who were like, oh my God, Nick betrayed us. They couldn't believe I started criticizing Bernie and AOC, because you guys know I did work on the Bernie campaign, right? There's so many people. We had a hard divorce. Whereas like I started criticizing the people that I can't believe it. And I'm like, they're like, why are you criticizing Bernie and AOC? Of course I would criticize them. Those are the people who I granted power with my organizing power. The people who you grant power, the people who's on your side is the people you need to be criticizing the most. That's the same way that's the same reason why I started going after the Democrats the most, because I voted for Obama in 2012. So I'm like, okay, after that, I only gotta make sure that no one else make that same mistake. And then I supported the progressives. So I'm like, okay, I fucked up there, and I'm explaining to you guys why I was wrong. You gotta hold these people accountable, right? There's some people just shocked by that. And it's crazy, right, Josana? In our culture, it's completely different. In our culture, it's like, if you support this side, you gotta spend all your time criticizing the other side. What sense does that make? You're already forming a coalition to defeat that other side. So the best thing you can do is make sure your coalition is strong, so when you guys take over, you guys can maintain your principle, your integrity, so you guys actually can get something done. And then when that happens, you will build your support, right? So the idea that what we have, where I would never criticize my side, never criticize the people I grant power, that doesn't even make sense. That doesn't even make sense. That's the only way you can go about this. Now, I want to get to the article, right? And then, because I want you guys to compare what Lula says about this situation compared to Bernie, compared to AOC, who voted for the $40 billion. They voted for it. I wouldn't say what they say, but they're not even giving you an explanation. They give you a middle finger. They said, we give you all your money away. We're going to rob from the American people. One of the greatest heists of all time done by the West and NATO. All this weapon about to go on the black market. All this money about to be funneled into oligarchs that are friendly with the West. That is where this money is going to go. So let's read this article so we all know what the U.S. progressive position is. That's why I titled this video the way I did. Despite all the criticism that we are open to hearing about Lula, I am open. I'm still learning about him. Josana has a ton of criticism about Lula, right? Despite everything that you guys know about Lula, compare his statements to what Bernie Sanders and what AOC and them are saying. Look how far to the right Bernie and AOC and our progressives are compared to Lula. Lula makes Bernie Sanders look like Ronald Reagan, and I say that even with all the criticisms of Lula. So now let's listen to what he says, so you guys know I'm not just bullshitting you. It said, here's the headline. Lula slams U.S. billions in military aid to Ukraine. Former Brazilian president criticized Biden administration for delivering billions in military assistance to Ukraine at the expense of Americans. It is not possible that President Biden, who never made a speech to give $1 for those who are dying of hunger in Africa, announces $40 billion to help Ukraine buy weapons. It is not possible. Now, as I continue to read this article, ask yourself this. Why isn't it Bernie Sanders making this argument every day? Why is it Lula? Why do we need to look overseas for someone to make this blatantly obvious observation? Nothing from Bernie. In fact, no, I wouldn't say nothing from Bernie. He's part of it. He's a part of the heist. Now, I want you to keep it in mind. I'm gonna keep going here. I'm gonna skip the a lot of the fluff here. I'm gonna get to his actual quotes. I don't like this article. I'll pull the other one. I got a few of them pulled up.
No, I just want to say, like, and you see his talking points. Lula is an adult, right? I would be like, it's wrong to send 40 billion to Nazis. Lula is like, you should not do that in the expense of your own people. A president has to take care of their people, not get their money and send to freaking Ukraine war.
So I want to put the other article up because there's like a headline. I want to show you guys what he actually says. This is a good headline, but it gives like it explains like the background of it's showing what the aid is going to. They show what the international criticism of it is, right? And it said, I'll read the tweet. This is a good tweet. He said, "To generous U.S. taxpayers, as expected to the $40 billion aid to Ukraine will be another money laundering project." That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, do people really think this $40 billion is going to help the Ukrainian people? The same thing was done in Afghanistan. Less than $10 billion will be weapons. The most will go to the friends of U.S. politicians. So unfortunately, this article don't get into a lot of quotes, but I have a few articles saved. So I'm gonna show you guys Lula's response to this whole crisis. Lula says Zelensky as responsible as Putin for the Ukraine war. This is literally what we've been saying. Now check this out. Former Brazilian president said Russia should never invade Ukraine, but he believes Ukrainian President Zelensky is as much to blame for the war as Russian leader Putin. In a Time magazine interview, maybe I should find the Time interview. I just want to read the quotes. Here it is. He said, I see the president of Ukraine speaking on television, being applauded, getting a standing ovation by all the European parliamentarians. This guy is as responsible as for the war, because in war there is not just one person guilty. Do you? I need to find the Times article. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I'll find a Time article because I want to get into his whole comments. Because I'll explain what he said. I'll find the transcript. Because when he was saying, he was like, if you look at the war is about the expansion of NATO. He said, why are we expanding NATO instead of advocating for peace? Why are we sending weapons instead of advocating for peace? Why are you guys Zelensky doing a media tour, being a celebrity instead of advocating for peace? And he blames NATO escalation for this conflict. Now compare that to Bernie. And he also said, you have them sending $40 billion in aid to Ukraine while mothers in the United States don't even have breast milk. Why do it take Lula to say this, but not our progressive politicians? Why did it take Marjorie Taylor Greene to say that instead of AOC? Now you guys see when I saw the video, even with criticism of Lula, I wish we could at least get there. I wish we could at least have a left movement in the United States that would call out NATO in the West.
And that's why I feel like the resistance, like there is a lot of, I think the more I understand the propaganda machine here and its effects in the psychological of a people, the more I feel like I need to go do some psychology degrees, but like it's so expensive. But anyways, it's so crazy to see how the propaganda machine works because it makes people proud. They are patriots. One thing we all say outside of here is like Americans are patriots, right? Like they are also like, they all like USA, USA. And they make people be proud of being mistreated, of being manipulated, of being robbed. Like the government just robbed us $40 billion.
I have this. I want to pull the whole transcript up, right? Because those articles was good, but here I want you guys to see this entire exchange. Because even when I was reading those headlines, I was like, you guys are missing the best part. The best part of the interview that he did with Times was when he was talking about the Ukraine-Russia war, and then like the reporter, because he has Putin derangement syndrome, he tries to push back at Lula, and then Lula dismantles him. It dismantles him. So I think here's where it starts. I want you guys to see this exchange because those headlines actually don't do enough justice. This is the question. I want to speak about the war in Ukraine. You have always prided yourself on being able to speak to everyone. Hugo Chavez as much as George Bush. But the world today is very fragmented diplomatically. I want to know if your approach still works. Could you speak to Vladimir Putin after what he's done in Ukraine? Now, for one, look at the framing of this question. You can already tell where this interviewer head is at. He's trying to get Lula to say, oh, I don't know if we can work with Putin. Or at least condemn Putin like the West want him to do. Now, he actually doesn't take debate. So that's the context, right? They add, we politicians reap what we sow. If I sow fraternity, solidarity, harmony, I'll reap good things. If I sow discord, I reap the quarrels. Putin shouldn't have invaded Ukraine, but it's not just Putin who's guilty. The U.S. and the EU are also guilty. What was the reason for Ukraine invasion? NATO? Then the U.S. and Europe would have said, U.S. and Europe should have said, Ukraine won't join NATO. That would have solved the problem. You guys see, I didn't like the other headlines because they didn't get to his full quote. Now I'm gonna keep going because this guy started to push back, and look how Lula handles it. He said, "Do you think the threat of Ukraine joining NATO was Russia's real reason for invading?" Now, guys, this question is propaganda because I told you guys I've been watching a lot of mainstream media, so I know what the opposition is saying. They've been framing this entire war inaccurately because they know the West is unreasonable. So whenever they talk about what Russia's demands are, even though Russia's demands from day one has always been clear, they want to stop the eastward expansion of NATO, demilitarize Ukraine, and allow the Donbass to go independent like they wanted to, which is not unreasonable. But in media, whenever they report on this, and you hear this a lot in MSNBC and CNN, they will say, well, Russia claims the reason why they had this war because they want to stop NATO. But is that the real reason? We actually think Putin just won a conquest. It's like, show us the evidence that that's not the Russian goal to stop the NATO encroachment. So now they asked this question. Now after he asked this part, this is when I knew that he wanted Lula to say the pro-Western narrative on this topic. But he does not take the bait. Unlike Bernie Sanders, he does not take the bait. So he said, do you think the threat of Ukraine joining NATO was Russia's real reason? Repeating the mainstream media conspiracy theory that Russia is lying about that, right? Even though it's been clear from day one in the Minsk Accord and what Russian ministers have said from day one, that is a red flag, NATO and Ukraine. So Lula says that's the argument they put forward. If they have a secret one, we don't know. The other issue was Ukraine joined the EU. Europeans could have said, no, now is not the moment for Ukraine to join the EU. We'll wait. So what Lula is saying is, instead of blaming just Putin and Russia, why not just look at the West like, bro, the West could have easily stopped this by saying, yo, Ukraine, we can't have you in NATO. We can't have you in EU, right? Because Ukraine is functionally a NATO country. Because being a part of a NATO country is getting military support when you get invaded. They've been sent weapons after they was invaded. So all you gotta do, all you have to say is, we can't have you part of NATO. It's just that simple. You already know you got security, but they didn't want to do that because they wanted escalation. So now let's continue the interview. I'm going a little bit long here. And this is where the reporters start repeating debunked mainstream media propaganda. And Lula is not having it. He said, but I think they did try to speak to Russia. And Lula said, no, they didn't. The conversations were very few. If you want peace, you have to have patience. You need to negotiate for 10, 15, 20 days, a whole month trying to find a solution. I think dialogue only works when it's taken seriously. Now remember, the context in which I'm presenting the story. Compare this to the position that the progressives in the United States have. They have full-fledged Putin derangement syndrome, where even the thought of saying that this is the West's fault, they are not having it. If you say that, you're considered a Putin puppet, a Putin sympathizer. When I said multiple times, I couldn't give a fuck about Putin. He's an anti-communist. I don't like the guy. I'm sure he's responsible for crimes. It's just, this is the easiest position to get correct as a leftist, as an anti-imperialist. But look how the state of the U.S. left is, that they can't even get this right. I'll read a little bit more because this whole Ukraine segment is really good. If you were president right now, what will you do? What will you do? Will you have been able to avoid the conflict? Now, look at this answer. I don't know if I'll be able to. If I was president, I would have phoned Biden, Putin, Germany, Emmanuel Macron, because war is not the solution. I think the problem is if you don't try and don't fix things, you have to try. Now compare this to what the Social Democrats in Sweden and Norway is doing. Those psychopaths. Remember the first ever female leaders in Finland, right? The new progressive leader that they have. She is now a NATO clown trying to push Russia to World War III. She's not even trying to have peace talks. They're trying to join NATO, even though they already get security assurances as an EU state. So every other Western leader, every other quote-unquote progressive leader is going along, well, at least in the global north, right? Now compare that to how Africa and in South America leftists are presenting this issue, compared to how U.S. leftists present this. But sorry, I need to stop ranting. Let me continue to read this passage. So, because I think this is a very last good part I'll read, and then I'll get your thoughts, Josana. This is where he called out U.S. hypocrisy. I sometimes get worried. I was very concerned when the U.S. and EU adopted Juan Guaido as president of the country in 2019. You don't play with democracy. For Guaido to be president, he will have to be elected. Bureaucracy can't substitute politics. In politics, it's two-headed states who are governing, both elected by the people, who have to sit down at the negotiation table and look at each other in the eye and talk. So that's him calling out the West for their hypocrisy. He's like, how can you talk about defending Ukraine as a sovereign state when you literally interfered in the sovereignty of Venezuela? So once again, even if you are to my right on this issue, Bernie Sanders and every single leftist should be able to articulate that hypocrisy. But not only do they not articulate it, Bernie Sanders, sorry, at least AOC, I think AOC more than Bernie on this issue, to be honest. AOC joins the Democratic caucus in destroying the sovereignty of Venezuela by backing Juan Guaido. So that's why I titled the video the way I did. Lula is making these progressives in the United States look like Ronald Reagan. Because on the imperialism issue, this is a big issue, not like a small disagreement. This is a big issue for our progressives in this country to be getting wrong. Now I'm gonna get to this part. I think this is the last part I want to share. This whole interview is really good, but I definitely want to read the Ukraine part. Actually, I think there's some more. This whole part is good. So, and now sometimes I sit and watch the president of Ukraine speaking on television, being applauded, getting a standing ovation by all the European parliamentarians. This guy is as responsible as Putin for the war. See, this is why I brought this article up, because the other articles cut it off after here. Because I'm like, bro, his rants are the best part. Don't cut it off. But anyway, he said, because in the war, there's not just one person guilty. Saddam Hussein was as guilty as Bush for the outbreak of the 2003 Iraq War, because Saddam Hussein could have said, you can come here and check, and I will prove that I do not have weapons of mass destruction. But he lied to his people. And now the president of Ukraine can say, come on, let's stop talking to him about this NATO business. Now, that last part, Lula, I don't agree with that one. Reading this again, I strongly don't agree with this part. Even if Saddam Hussein would have did everything the United States would have asked him to do, I think they still would have did Iraq, because it was a global strategy they started since the 90s, where they had a giant list of countries they planned on invading. And Iraq was one of them.
And Brazil was the third one in that list. So he's clowning right here, because like they also went in and there was no weapons of mass destruction. And I
see what Lula trying to say though, but this part of the segment, I do strongly disagree with him. This point about Ukraine, I agree, because he said if Zelensky wanted to stop this invasion, he literally could have just said, hey, Putin, I'm done with NATO. I don't want to do NATO. We're not doing NATO. It's not happening. But he was doing the exact opposite. It was just floating like, yeah, we may join NATO. No, actually, the West floated was like, yeah, we may accept you as NATO. Then Zelensky was like, yeah, I think we should join NATO. How is that a smart idea if you didn't want your country to get in this conflict with Russia? But actually, so Al, everything he said in this segment, this part of the strongest, just because it's the Saddam comparison I don't agree with. But I see what he's trying to say though. So I'll read this last part. Because yeah, I definitely want to read the part, because this is when the reporter you can tell he started to get irritated. Because imagine the backlash that Bernie and AOC and the squad would get if they came after Zelensky this way. They give podcasters a ton of shit for calling out Zelensky. And you notice their lips are quiet. Just because I'm online a lot, I seen a lot of like liberals question Zelensky every once in a while, and then whenever they do that, they get a ton of hate. So Bernie and AOC playing politics because they won't do it, because they know they would take a lot of shit if they criticize Zelensky. Now compare that to what Lula is saying though. So this is when the reporter trying to defend Zelensky, because this is when Lula called out Zelensky as the reason why this war is happening. So he said, so Zelensky should have talked to Putin more, even with 10,000, 100,000 Russian troops at his border. Pause. That's propaganda. They had 100,000 Russian troops at Russia's border. Like, you guys see how they present that? If you had troops on your border, that's your border. Look at the United States military bases.
The U.S. has robot dogs with guns on it in its borders. So I don't know what's the problem with it.
Yeah. So look at how he asks these questions, right? So he trying to get, like, he ain't pushing back at Lula because he was trying to get Lula to only bash Putin. Lula pushed back on the NATO West narrative. Now he's like, shit, I gotta defend the West, bro. Or here's my career be over. So he said, so Zelensky should have talked to Putin more, even with 100,000 Russian troops at the border. So this question is implying that Zelensky shouldn't have done nothing. You guys see how crazy that position is? The position of these people, Zelensky should have done nothing to prevent this war. But anyway, let's read Lula's response. He said, I don't know the president of Ukraine, but his behavior is a bit weird. It seems like he's part of the spectacle. He is on television morning, noon, and night. He's in the UK Parliament, the German Parliament, the French Parliament, the Italian Parliament, as if he was waging a political campaign. He should be at the negotiating table. Guys, why is Bernie not saying this? Why is the U.S. left not saying this? Well, at least let me be clear, the boutique establishment left. Once again, every single one of the Progressive Caucus voted for this.
You have been saying it.
Yeah, so to be clear, just to be clear, RBN and our allies and the people on the ground that are not supporting these scumbags of the real left, the institutionalized power in this country that's cosplayed to the left, they are all for this shit, and they sound like the exact opposite of what Lula and Black Agenda Report, the Black Alliance for Peace, stands on this. So it's not us who changed, it's the squad and Bernie who became imperialists. So let's look at this. You see how he's trying to defend Zelensky, the reporter? Can you really say that to Zelensky? He didn't win a war. It came to him. Now, this is when you really put the gas pedal down. He did want war. If he didn't want war, he could have negotiated a little more. That's it. I criticized Putin when I was in Mexico City, saying that it was a mistake to invade, but I don't think anyone trying to help create peace. People are stimulating hate against Putin. That won't solve things. We need to reach an agreement, but people are encouraging war. You are encouraging Zelensky, and then he thinks he is the cherry on your cake when we should be having a serious conversation. Okay, you was a nice comedian, but let us not make war for you to show up on TV. And then we should say to Putin, you have a lot of weapons, but you do not need to use them on Ukraine. Let's talk. God damn. Tell me how you really feel.
This is a guy. This is coming from a guy that knows what he's talking about, right? Because, like, he was arrested to prevent him to run against Bolsonaro, okay, in the last election. The person from Fernando Haddad, the other person from the Workers' Party, lost for Bolsonaro because the boutique left from Brazil, that like Ciro Gomes, which is like a man that he has farms and he wants to sell the Amazon rainforest as much as Bolsonaro wants. The boutique left from Brazil, they went to Paris, like this guy went to Paris. So like we said, they went to Paris and Bolsonaro only won because the boutique left didn't go vote. So if you compare the numbers of Bolsonaro and Haddad, the difference is exactly the people that didn't vote because they were not happy with the Workers' Party. So the liberals. Lula now is making the liberals not only support, but vote for him. So he knows about having conversations with opposite sides. And he made an alliance with now centrist that used to be right-winger since forever. He's going to be the vice president candidate.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. That's so fucked.
No, so, he knows negotiation. This man, at least, in the very least, he knows negotiation.
So let me show you guys what the United States left seems not to be concerned with. Because I show you guys Lula's stance on Ukraine. And I am not exaggerating when I'm talking about the establishment boutique left. They are all on board of sending weapons to Ukraine. They are all for somehow defeating Putin when victory in this war is not possible. They are literally just extending this conflict in order to make money for weapon manufacturers who profit at a record high because of this conflict. So this is what a lot of people have been saying now. And apparently Bernie don't care about this, right? This is the DHS saying this. This is Joe Biden's DHS saying this. But Bernie can't say this. DHS concerned over Nazis returning to U.S. after fighting Ukraine. So, guys, I'm going to sum this article up because I already did a lot of reading this stream. So, essentially what they're saying is we send all these weapons to Ukraine. We give them all this training. We are training fucking Nazis because I saw someone in the comment. There are a lot of people in the far right in Brazil who are Nazi sympathizers as well who fight in Ukraine. There are a lot of American far right Nazis who fight in Ukraine because remember what we explained when this conflict first started. Ukraine was always seen as a Nazi hub among Nazis. Like people in the United States, people in all across Europe, they will go to Ukraine like it's like fucking Israel. It's like their motherland. They know it's safe to be Nazis there. So when this war popped off, you had a lot of white nationalists in the United States who immediately went to fight for the Azov Battalion. A lot of far-right Nazis in Brazil immediately went to start fighting for the Azov Battalion. The amount of volunteer fighters they have is insane. So now we're going to train them, we're going to arm them, and then they're going to come back with military training.
I want to move out.
This is what the DHS is warning about. And now check this out. And then you can reply to this if you want, Josiah. You guys know friend of the show, Ryan Knight. Arms sent to Ukraine will end up in criminal hands, said Interpol chief, which is obvious. There's already been reports of like javelins being found on the black market. People selling stingers and shit. This is what happened during the war on terror. People was like, yo, what's up with all these terrorist groups with U.S. weapons now? Remember how we always arm the people we end up fighting later? This is exactly what's going to happen. These arms will end up in extremist white supremacist hands, and it's going to flood the black market. So isn't it funny? The liberals who are pushing for gun control, Josiah, they're pushing for gun control. Meanwhile, they're flooding Eastern Europe with guns. It doesn't get crazier than that. But Bernie and Nina Turner, everything's going to be all right. We're going to be all right. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about this. That vote, like they did a lot of things, guys. You guys know all the criticisms I have of Bernie, AOC, and the squad. That vote was probably one of the most telling things. It's one of the most damning things. And no person in the working class, no anti-imperialist should ever vote for a Democrat ever again after that package. It was one of the greatest heists of the working class I have seen in a long time. But Josiah, I know you want to add in. I got some more shit after you get done.
Yeah, no, I just share. I just feel like it's boring to see like it's repeated like trying to dominate instead of coexist, and it's I don't know what we can like. I think we need to do here inside like things in order to like let the world know that we don't agree with what is being done, that we are also in danger. I think like we have to recognize this too. I don't know, as Americans.
So there might be some people saying, man, Nick, you're being really hard on the U.S. left right now. Once again, I'm talking about the U.S. establishment left, right? The U.S. establishment left. Bernie said all the people that came from Bernie Sanders' campaign, you see them turn into Democratic Party operatives. They also became into the biggest cheerleaders for this war. So the gray zone, Aaron Monte, Max Blumenthal, they've been doing a good job debunking the Ukraine war narrative. So check this out. I saw this on timeline earlier. This is unbelievable. This is a former Bernie Sanders aide who is smearing the gray zone. because they came out with this article, which is hilarious. And someone came out with this tweet summary of it, where the article was, "Why the Ukraine proxy war matters for the left." It was written by a progressive shitlib, a former aide of the Bernie Sanders campaign, who was making an argument why the United States left and why the left all across the world should care about the Ukraine war and why we should fund it. So then they just smear a gray zone. So this is a Bernie Sanders aide smearing the gray zone because they are critical about the United States position on the Ukraine crisis. He said, with that said, it's important to differentiate between the genuine anti-war, anti-imperialism, DSA, and others in the American left, and the authoritarian agitprop of the gray zone and the like. The right's goal is to divide the left, and we should not help them. But the goal of building a stronger left is served by identifying, engaging, and organizing with those who genuinely acting on the principles of solidarity, democracy, and human rights, and not wasting time with atrocity-denying grifters and clickbaiting provocateurs. This is Bernie Sanders' aide smearing the gray zone as a tool that is meant to divide the left. They're dividing the left because they're calling out the lies on Russia, Ukraine. So guys, that's him smearing the gray zone, but it gets better because this is the article that he's quoting. This comes from Leftist News, friend of the show as well. This is the article. Why Ukraine matters for the left. So we're not going to read the whole thing. Here's the subheader. Opposition to U.S. adventurism is principled, but this is Putin's adventurism, and the left must stand firmly against it. See, once again, he's muddying the waters of this issue. This is about stopping NATO expansion and Western aggression and imperialism that has been constantly expanding, including military bases surrounding Russia. Broken agreements, broken treaties. Sweden and Finland breaking their treaties with Russia in the 90s. They did it over and over and over and over again, breaking these treaties. But that's not what the issue is about. Not about NATO. It's about this. So I'm not going to read the whole thread because he actually did a good breakdown. Did Leftist News. Here are some of the highlights of Matt Dutt's terrible article on the left in Ukraine. He starts off by praising the Biden administration, claiming they have made a strenuous and very public diplomatic effort to avert it. So the people who literally kept saying, even though they knew that Ukraine wasn't going to join NATO, they kept saying they knew they wasn't going to let Ukraine join NATO, but they was publicly saying, oh, well, I think there's a door for Ukraine to join NATO. So if they wasn't going to let Ukraine join NATO, why would they say that? The Biden administration and the United States as a whole, because not based on just presidents, right? The U.S. empire, right? So the U.S. was doing everything they can to probe Russia into this conflict, including arming the Nazis in the 2014 Maidan coup and backing the far-right extremists in Ukraine. So the article itself is already saying that, well, the Biden administration tried to prevent the war. Already wrong. So I'm asking you guys this question before I proceed. Why is there a Bernie Sanders aide doing apologizing for the Biden administration imperialism? It makes no sense. So anyway, let's continue. So anyway, this is just debunking it. Yes, the Ukraine war could have been prevented. I'm gonna read this tweet right here. Dutt says that he is addressing leftist arguments in their strongest form. He is lying. Any article on Ukraine that missed the mention of the 2014 coup is just war propaganda. So he doesn't even mention the 2014 coup in this article. I will read the whole thing, but we'd be raging all day. So pretty much this whole article is just him giving apologetics, pretty much repeating state propaganda. So the reason why I bring this, I don't want to get too much to the article. I don't even want to prop the guy up. So the reason why I brought this up is you have Bernie Sanders aides smearing the left, and this is Benjamin Norton. We talking about Lula, guys. I didn't forget the main topic. So this guy, I showed you guys what Lula.
How do you tie this up to be? Who do you trace this back to? Like, let's do the follow the money. Who are we tracing this back to?
Just want to take over.
Help me. Like, you have to like oh my god, Nick left me on the spot. I think we have to trace this back to, for who is it interesting? Who has this answer to me as an outsider in the comments? Who can we trace back to the fact that the left is being bought?
Like,
How can we trace that? Like,
I sorry, I
treat me
had
like I've never been to America before. Like, where are we tracing this back to? Like, I know the answer. I'm just being rhetorical.
yeah, sorry, I literally had to get that. I had to get that personal business. But anyway, I'm gonna read this super chat. I'm gonna show you guys what Matt Dust said about Lula. I'll show you guys Lula's takes on Russia and Ukraine. Look at what he said. And he said, "Thanks for $10. How could Bernie hire someone like Matt Dust? Shame on you, Bernie." The same way, who's that? Fuck, I'm blanking on her name. Simone Sanders. The same way he hired someone like Simone Sanders. The same way he hired someone like Chuck Rocha, who's a grifter, who's a Democrat operative. The same reason he had Pramila Jayapal as a advisor of his campaign, when Pramila Jayapal was saying that we should take it easy, we shouldn't be criticizing Biden and the Democratic Party. That is what she was saying. There's a reason why Bernie make these bad hiring decisions, man. I'll beyond giving him benefit of the doubt. So let me get to the smear job that he did on Lula, and this was reported by Benjamin Norton. So I am showing you guys this because this is the guy that Bernie Sanders hired. This whole video is about you guys doing this comparison. And this is what Benjamin Norton said. In this absurd propaganda, Bernie Sanders advisor Matt Dust attacks Lula and cites Chile's liberal imperialist President Boric, who is seen to be a sad joke on the Latin American left. And then, guys, I'm not going to pretend I know everything about Latin American politics, but all of my allies and comrades that like really invested in Latin American politics, like Josana, they've been telling me about Chile's neoliberal president. And from I can't give you all the receipts, but based on what I heard, this guy is a piece of shit. But he quotes this guy.
He quoted. Sorry.
Yeah.
He co-opted leftist speech and to elect himself. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, after just 2 months in power, Boric did a 180 and sent the military to repress the Mbupe community. Wow. So this is his counterpoint. And let's see what he says. As a counterpoint to Lula's position, consider the stance of the neoliberal. He wrote that with a straight face. He said, Lula, I know you sound like you're making sense, but consider the neoliberal position. He said few countries in the world are more entitled to point the finger back at the U.S. than Chile, whose socialist president, yes, motherfucker, doesn't. Do you guys see what he just said? He said few countries in the world are more entitled to point the finger back at the U.S. So they explain how the U.S. overthrew their socialist president, which explains why no one in the South America, the global South, or the left should trust U.S. because they are imperialists. They do not have your best interests at heart. Zelensky banned socialist leftist parties. Meanwhile, he kept the fascist white supremacist parties in place. Why would anyone believe allowing these Nazis who've been emboldened to continue is beyond me? Guys, Al-Qaeda spread from Iraq. Now it was in Afghanistan, Syria, and all in Somalia and Ethiopia as well. Why do you guys think it spread? It spread because it was emboldened. So when the West sent all these weapons to Nazis in the Ukraine, send them all this money, this is gonna grow the movement, the white supremacist movement in Eastern Europe that was already being reported on as being a problem. It's going to get worse because of this position. So what is even his argument? I'm skimming this. What's even his argument? Russia has opted for war. So he doesn't even debunk Lula here. He literally just saying, yo, Chile, they know they was victim of U.S. imperialism and they joined. That's literally what he's saying. Chile was a victim of U.S. imperialism, and they know to join the United States bandwagon because they have a neoliberal U.S. puppet now. So why don't Lula just don't understand what Chile does? This is so stupid.
And I think it's so funny that like the least radical in my country here is way far radical than anybody here that claims to be a radical, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said, Josana, too. And that's why I said at the beginning of the stream. This wasn't me just coming out and saying, "Yo, Lula's the greatest. He should be our leader." That's not the point of this stream, guys. As someone who's lived in the Imperial Core, a victim of the Imperial Core, I am showing you guys why I bash Bernie and AOC in the squad so much. We don't even have a suitable left in this country. Like, with all the criticism that you guys have of Lula, that Josana have of Lula, you see how much further he is from who Bernie, AOC, and them, who's considered the farthest left in this country. Do you guys see the difference? And I'm showing you guys the position of his aides. You guys see the position of the majority report, Vosh, who used to have Ukraine flags all over his profile. Like, not just Bernie. It's literally the entire boutique progressive media sphere and their allies. But Josan, do you have? I know I went for a while. You want
Yeah,
to?
like yeah, just like observing what maybe for people in the US is a strategy. Maybe you were propagandized and educated to think that your country going to other countries and invading it in many ways, physical war, sanctions, or just coup d'etats and whatever. Maybe you were taught that this is a behavior, right? Like not respecting the sovereignty of other countries. And I feel like so you create the necessity of economic blocks because these countries need to defend themselves. And you see the BRICS, right? The BRICS, which is Russia, China, India, Brazil, and South Africa. Like, and you see the attack on these countries and the urgency of separating that block. And it's just like the rest of the world, the global South, like we start getting like more and more radicalized and more defensive and creating ways like Lula wants to create, right? He wants to do the Pan-American currency to fight the dollar. Gaddafi wanted petroleum to be charged in gold and then boof, lost his head. But yeah, Lula wants to
So
do
there are a
that.
lot, and this is what, and you will never see the U.S. left obviously question U.S. hegemony. They agree with it. And now you had, and this is Josano joking with me. We were talking before. This shit's gonna get Lula killed, guys, because you guys see. We're gonna talk about this here very soon. Our oligarchy purposely destroyed our economy, waging this new Cold War because they know like this Ukraine package is gonna get funneled to their weapon manufacturer friends, right? They know they're going to be taken care of with Wall Street cash. So we are now living in late stage capitalism where they know things are going to get worse. So now they're crashing the economy on purpose. And they made a giant miscalculation thinking that they're going to destroy Russian economy. They're going to put a chokehold on Putin. But the ruble is higher than it's ever been right now. And the American people are struggling and suffering because of this miscalculation the West has made. So the consequences of this miscalculation by the West cannot be understated because now you have other people that like, maybe we should establish our own currency. Because if the United States and the West can just cut you off at any time just because there's a geopolitical disagreement, we need to start working on other alternatives before they randomly choose us because we don't want to bow down to the West's interest. So this is why Lula might get his ass killed because Lula proposes creating a Latin American currency to be freed of US dollar. Now, guys, Gaddafi was killed for saying the same shit because Gaddafi wanted to create a pan-African community that had their own dollar that was free from US influence. Lula is floating the idea of doing the same thing, having a pan-South Latin American alliance. So they don't have to be reliant on Western hegemony, especially in this time where you have South American countries that are electing socialist and leftist leaders at an extreme rate. Lula is like up 15 points against Bolsonaro, even though that race isn't over. But he is extremely, he's very high up in the polls. And the left has been getting wins in South America.
He would win. Like the elections in Brazil are, you have the first, so we have 44 parties, right? And the parties can make alliances. And then you can have all the alliances running. So you have a first round election. Usually from the first round that you have like, I don't know, 10, 20 candidates, you're going to have two for the second round. But Lula is seen to be winning the elections in the first round with like more than 20% difference from Bolsonaro. And Bolsonaro wants to overturn because we have electronic vote, and he wants to take that away because then it's easier to, to do his thing.
Now this, I gotta move on because there's another. I want to do another economic segment, so that's related to this. But once again, I'm not just picking just on Bernie. I'm not just using them as the only example. DSA on this issue has been beyond trash. DSA is sorry. Yeah, thank you for I know Josana had to go to work. Thank you for joining me today. Thank
Thank
you,
you for
Josana.
having me. Bye, everybody. Mwah.
Yeah,
Love you
yeah, thank
all.
you. Thank you. Josana wasn't originally scheduled, but she is our Brazilian expert here, so she joined us on the fly. Thank you for joining us once again, Josana. So DSA pretty much is a group of socialists who their job is to sheep herd people to the Democratic Party. That is their entire mission statement. Their entire mission statement is we are socialists who believe social change should happen through the Democratic Party. So the premise of the organization is already a joke. You guys want to see what their response to this has been? And by the way, I have noticed a lot of DSA people often have Ukraine flags in their Twitter profiles. Like they are all for the Ukraine war psyop, the new Cold War. Now check this out. Caitlin. This tweeted by Caitlin Johnstone, friend of the show, one of the greatest political writers of our time. I'm not joking. DSA meeting declares war creates the possibility for a push of socialist ideas. War creates the possibility for a push of socialist ideas. At a recent panel event hosted by DSA chapter for the state of Maine, how do you say his name? He's a Ukrainian guy. Jesus Christ. What is that name? Sorry, I'm not trying. Sorry, that's mean. I probably shouldn't say that. But it's a Ukrainian guy. I can't even begin to say that name. So he's a leader of the Ukrainian left. He put forward a chilling perspective that the war creates a possibility for a push of socialist ideas in Ukraine. The panelists and DSA moderators stated their agreement with the speaker. What? I ain't gonna lie, guys. I probably gotta look into this, dude. Jesus fucking Christ. There's no way it happened like that. The panelists and the DSA moderators stated their agreement with the speaker and demanded the U.S. government deploy more tanks, missiles, and howitzers to wage war against Russia, regardless of risk of nuclear holocaust. So we have Bernie Sanders and the squad voting for weapons. DSA, the people who support them, they are cheering on this never-ending proxy war. If it goes the way they want it to go, this wouldn't end until all the Ukrainians died. They don't want peace because they don't want to give any geopolitical victory to Putin. You're not anti-war if you're anti-war only if it aligns with U.S. interests. I don't give a fuck about U.S. interests. I want war to end. And since I want war to end, even if it gives Putin a geopolitical victory, we need to negotiate to give him to end the conflict. And this me being anti-war is why I blame the U.S., the United States, NATO, and the West, just like Lula, because they are responsible for this war escalating to this point, and they started this by endorsing the 2014 Maidan coup. How is this a hard position for the left to get? How? How is this a hard position? So I think I get you guys. Let me see I didn't see this receipt. So I just saw the first receipt that Caitlin posted. So this is me. I'm gonna read this one. I actually didn't see this one. Let's see what this one says. Starodubstev got right to the point. The Ukrainian people have a right to fight. Left-wing people can support the Ukrainian people to fight to be Ukrainians. You notice that these people who always say, "Oh, I stand with the Ukrainians," they don't stand for the Eastern Ukrainians. They don't stand for the Russian-speaking Ukrainians. They don't give a fuck about the 14,000 Eastern Ukrainians that was shelled and been victim of multiple terrorist attacks by the Nazis in Western Ukraine. This is what kills me. People say I stand with Ukraine, but not all of it. That's what they're really saying. And if you stood with Ukraine, you want this conflict to end. Why do you give a fuck if NATO is in Ukraine, if the Ukrainian people are safe? And if Putin was lying about this war being about NATO, the global community, including anti-war movements, can handle it from there. But just like Lula said, there's been no indication whatsoever that Russia has been lying about their stated objective goal from day one: stopping the advancement of NATO and denazifying Ukraine. And when I said I was anti-fascist, I meant it. When I see the Azov Battalion being bombed, when I see them going away, you can rest in peace. Remember when the left used to say punch a Nazi when it was about Trump supporters? But now they don't want the Azov Battalion to be disbanded? All these are peace options. So that's my rant. I only got one line to what this guy said at DSA. So let me continue the DSA quote. The Ukrainian people have a right to fight. Left-wing people can support the Ukrainian people to fight to be Ukrainian. That is Nazi rhetoric. You guys realize that is kind of what the Nazis in Ukraine says? I'm sorry to stop myself before I read the whole thing, but I cannot help it. So what the Azov Battalion, they are literally Nazis because they believe in one people, one country, and one state. So they started launching their attacks on Eastern Ukraine because they wanted to get rid and purge the Russian-speaking people. They want one country. So when they say we want Ukraine to be filled with Ukrainians, they want to get rid of Russian influence in the country because 1/3 of the country speak Russian, and they view Russia as this evil Asiatic horde that is not related to their Western European background. So him saying he support Ukrainian people to fight to be Ukraine, even though Ukraine has culturally always been a part of Russia, that's him conceding to Azov Battalion logic that they have a right to fight to get rid of the Russian scourge in their population. That's how I interpret it. Let me know in the comments if you guys agree or disagree with my analysis. I would love to learn more, but that's my take on this, right? So I will try to continue the rest of this. To support this fight, people need to voice their opinion for sending weapons to Ukraine and for limiting the military possibilities of the Russian regime. By pushing also for sanctions. Oh, Jesus. We got socialists calling for sanctions that will harm the working people of Russia and the sanctions that is harming the global working class as well. Jeez, this is DSA, guys. This is DSA. You guys saw the votes of Bernie Sanders in the squad. And that's the reason why I want to show you guys the position of Lula. Compare the position of Lula and Cuba in their response to this, and socialists in the global south compared to this nonsense that we have to deal with in the United States left that's propping up NATO, which has been an imperial power for colonization. They look at AFRICOM in the United States and what they did to Africa. These privileged white leftists don't give a fuck about freeing colonized people from the colonization power of the West and of NATO. They said here at the bottom, we should deliver weapons to Ukraine. So what is the point of you guys getting excited about more progressives getting elected into the Democratic Party? I'm very honest. I'm in like the Mickey Constant's running. This other DSA person who's supposed to be better than the Mickey's running. Okay, even the DSA candidate wins. Every single one of them gonna vote for weapons to Ukraine. John Fetterman, if he was a senator, would have voted for weapons to Ukraine. Nina Turner, she won. She will vote for weapons to Ukraine. All these progressives in the United States is for this insane, unhinged policy that will only hurt Americans. And I'm going to get into that point up next because let's get into some economics. And I'm going to show you guys why these progressives are getting this so wrong. You had the mainstream media pretending that Russia made a miscalculation. The biggest miscalculation that has been made in this conflict has been the West thinking they can use economic warfare to starve out the Russians. Instead, the United States and the West just weakened their position in the world stage. That's why Brazil and many other countries are looking to have their own currency. The United States weakened themselves because of this. The working class is being sanctioned because of this. But I'm gonna get into that in the next segment. So stay tuned. I'm gonna read some super chat. Hopefully I didn't miss too many. When I'm on my own, it's hard when I do segments to catch every super chat. I'm gonna try to do a chat check so I don't miss none. Thank you for the $10. Appreciate your channel. Bernie Sanders has earned my mistrust and goes down in my history as my historical record as irrelevant with no legacy. Bernie Sanders hurt his legacy so much, guys. I cannot. He hurt his legacy the same way that everyone who sells out hurt their legacy. John Lewis, me and Rome, we roasted John Lewis so much. Everything that John Lewis did in civil rights era, I don't give a fuck about because he literally voted to create a slave state in Libya. He's a fucking imperialist who helped back up the police state. So we got a lot of great freedom fighters, but will you sell out? But as Black Agenda Report laid out, this is who Bernie Sanders always was. Bernie Sanders used to be a staunch anti-imperialist until the 90s. Like he used to argue against CIA talking points, the global intervention into the U.S. intervention in the global South and South America. He used to speak out against that. He went from that, and then he voted to expand NATO. He was for the Yugoslavia war in the 90s that lost Michael Prenti. So he became a senator and sold out. And his job was to sheep herd otherwise progressive people to the Democratic Party. Same for 499. RBN, please unblock Gene. There's someone else reached out to me. I fixed someone else blocking situation. I don't know what's going on. I don't know the situation about this, but someone DM me on Twitter. I can figure it out. I don't block anyone. Whenever you guys come with me with blocking stories, I have no idea what it's about. The only people I block are like the porn accounts and like the spam accounts you guys see. So I had to look into that. I'm trying to do a fact check. When I'm doing my shows on my own, it's hard to look at the chat at the same time. I'm trying to make sure I ain't missing any more super chats. Keep them coming, guys. I think those are the only two I've seen that you guys left recently, at least. So I want to do the economic analysis. Let me get this pulled up. Because Russian sanctions and this strategy have backfired on the West and the United States, despite all the mainstream propaganda that you probably heard. So I've been following the Ukraine conflict, especially in corporate media a lot. So I can report to you guys what the opposition is saying, so I can see what their overall strategy, because you can also tell the strategy a lot by what the media is presenting. So the narrative that has been going on in Washington, D.C. about the Russia-Ukraine war was for the last 100 days. They were saying, oh, this was a giant miscalculation by Russia. Oh, this is the end of Russia as we know as a country. Putin might be done. They made a huge mistake. So I'm asking you guys, why would they do this? Why do they present this argument? Why do they present the narrative that Russia is losing this war, even though it's clear by all accounts? And this is why media had to recently report on the fact that Russia is winning. They've been trying to paint for the last 100 days that Russia has been losing. There's been bad strategy. Now, guys, I'm asking you, why do you guys think they would do this? I just have theories for you guys. One, is to make people believe that this war was winnable by the Ukrainian people in the first place. So if people think that this war was winnable, that Ukraine can just defeat Russia with military strength, then people won't start asking questions why we send so much money and aid to Ukraine to fight an unwinnable war. So that's how they got away with the heist on the working class. If only we send more money, we can win, even though we all know that's not possible. And there also was some hubris too, because I do believe, and this is something I really don't know yet. Did they destroy the economy on purpose? What did they destroy? Did they make things worse on purpose and use this as a shield, or did they really misjudge Russia's significance on the global stage? And I don't know if you guys remember this, but Lindsey Graham in 2015, he was like, Russia got an economy the size of Italy, right? It'd be easy to starve them out. And you heard this in the lead up of pushing for sanctions. Oh, we can just starve out Russia. Their economy not shit. This was a massive misjudgment by the West. If you look at Russia's GDP, by just converting from rubles to US dollars, then yeah, you get an economy that's smaller than Spain. But that comparison, that makes no sense when you look at the purchasing power parity. This is what they call the PPP. This is what the IMF use. This is what many economic organizations use to judge economic powerhouse. So this accounts for productivity, standards of living, capital welfare, and other things. So when you look at it that way, when you measure the Russian GDP based on the PPP, you can tell the Russian economy goes from like the size of Spain, just going by ruble to U.S. currency conversion, and then it becomes as large as Germany, right? So what a lot of people in the United States, because we are a service-based economy, they don't understand. They think just by shutting down the Russian economy, that would be enough. No. Russia is responsible for a large exports of oil. And the products that they export has a giant significance on the global stage. Now think about, I'm going to use this example. Because this article I'm going to pull up, they use the same example as well. Netflix is way bigger than Nestle, right? Nestle is a food production company. So Netflix is about 4 to 5 times bigger than that company, right? Because the United States is a service-based economy, right? So if you look at Russia as a giant size, you're thinking, okay, it's a giant part of the economy, right? So if you sanction the United States Netflix, that would hurt the working class, that would hurt them more and only them. No, you only sanctioning entertainment when you look at the United States economy, right? But if you sanction Russia and their economy, you're sanctioning something that is a part of a giant global order, which is Russian oil. So by doing this, and Russia's strategy by making countries only pay with oil by rubles, that was extremely smart, because now if Russia is able to sell oil around the world, and countries like India are able to negotiate for lower prices, then the only people that are being sanctioned are the Western customers who are being hit with inflated prices. California gas prices like $9 a gallon right now. So this war has been a sanction on the American working class, Europeans, right? And it increased the power of the ruble in the Russian economy, because now you got other countries in the global south. You got a lot of countries like, now we can't do this, man. We can't fight this war for you. This is why Biden is begging Saudi Arabia to join their side. So I'm gonna show you guys this article. I ran way too much on this. So I'm gonna show you guys this article on this, and then I'm gonna get my guess in here. I just now saw you, Carl. I was doing my presentation. I'm gonna get you in here as soon as I read this last part here. So this is the article I want to show you guys. And this is what DSA, this is what progressives are all for. They said we should have more sanctions. We should be all for this economic war. Is America the real victim of anti-Russia sanctions? And it says, by misjudging the size and importance of Russia's economy, the West might have taken steps towards its own isolation. Now, remember the story I just covered for you guys. Lula is looking to establish a Latin American-based currency. You have an African left that is developing that wanted to form an African-based currency because they saw how the West, with their human rights hypocrisy, can just shut out people who they just on a whim, right? So that we gotta be independent from this. We can't allow the United States to just destroy our country because their geopolitical goals. You guys see how this hurt the United States? But this is what the strategy that progressives are for. That is the whole point of the stream. I want you guys to realize this. Oh, I really want to get you in here, Carlos. But I want to read a little bit of it. Actually, let me introduce Carlos. I'll get into a little bit of this article. Because the article, the concept I was explaining, the article gets into a lot of detail of what I was trying to explain on why people misjudge the reactions of this. That, like, when you look at a service-based economy like the United States, people assume that it would just fall only the United States customers was hurt. But the Russian economy is structured completely different, where if you sanction and destroy their economy, it's not going to just hurt them. And the thing is, the West, they all knew this. All the experts knew this. They was pretending that wasn't the case by actively lying in corporate media. So we're going to get into the article. I think it explains a little bit more. But before I do that, I do want to introduce my guest for today, our great friend of the show, our academic friend, Carlos Gallego. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Can you hear me okay, Nick?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you fine.
Excellent. No, I'm doing fine. I'm just, sitting back enjoying your commentary. This is excellent, and I think you bring up a great point of how this country went from manufacturing, say in the 50s during the supposed golden age of the American economy to what it is right now, which is right. We exported all the labor. We're now more of a service-based economy. And when sanctions like this go in place, we feel it in terms of prices because we don't own the resources necessary to make the stuff that we actually end up consuming.
Well said. And there's I just lost this comment. I was just about to pull it up. Someone said Russia copied the American petrodollar model. Yeah, dude, this is a massive miscalculation. Now the Fed literally just said they want to look at lowering wages in order to match inflation. I don't have the receipt ready for you guys, but I'll show you guys this. So I want to dive into this article. This article actually get really technical. So hopefully we can get through it because the concept I was explaining was kind of what they get into here, right? So this is the article. Carlos, if you want to chime in at any time, feel free to interrupt me, just because I'm presenting here. It says seldom. I'm gonna skip this part. This first quote. This is the Lindsey Graham quote that I mentioned earlier. They talk about how Lindsey Graham said in response to Putin invading Crimea, and they was mocking the size of the Russian economy. And I remember used to seeing this all the time. People were like, "Yo, the Russian economy is a joke," and I didn't know a ton about it either, so I just assumed it was right. But look at this article that explains what's happening to the global economy that most people don't know because they've been lied to. He says, "Seldom has the West so grossly misjudged an economy's global significance." French economist Jacques Sapir, a renowned specialist of the Russian economy, who teaches at the Moscow and Paris schools of economics, explained recently that the war in Ukraine has made us realize that the Russian economy is considerably more important than we thought. I'm pausing there because just think about this, guys. If you apply the best faith interpretation of what the Western leaders did, meaning they sanctioned Russia because they really believe it will hurt them and help us stop the war. You guys see how incompetent they are? That they didn't realize how important the Russian economy was. And I'm not talking about this guy. Like the guy who's talking is literally just doing his analysis, right? But this is literally what the Western society thought. They thought it was weak. So go ahead, Carlos.
No, just to add to your point, Nick, one thing that I also, and we can talk about this in a little bit, but one of the things that I think they're also miscalculating is the response of the global South and how they're anticipating, how they're using this moment to engage in political economic solidarity like Mexico and Cuba just had. signed that treaty about 4 days ago. They're giving props to newly elected presidents and talking about how the West talks about these newly elected presidents as, illegitimate or what have you. So I think that the global South, and this is why I think Biden, one of the reasons why Biden went to Asia was to try and rally the waning support for America's neoliberalism in key parts of the world, which is what's going to make Taiwan and China a big issue when that thing emerges also, because right now I think what we're realizing is we have lost our geopolitical clout and it's starting to show, and Europe is losing their geopolitical clout and it's starting to show, and the global South is basically unionizing, if you want to call it that right now, as a hemisphere against the North and saying this is our opportunity. If they want to go to war and want to basically starve their own people as a way to prove things to each other, that's fine. This is our moment to rise and show them that we produce the food, we have oil resources, you need us more than we need you. It's time to renegotiate.
And it's been wild to watch people not realize this, but it also been exciting to me. That's why I really want to see Lula win, just because he said he wanted to spearhead that effort in South America. But when people talk about this issue, especially in the corporate media, they say, "Oh, the international community, we all united against Putin." Guys, they are literally talking about the global North, the Western Hemisphere. That's it.
And the president of Mexico is in Cuba quoting Cuban Marxists during the speech. It's getting to that point now where they're not afraid to drop names that they know the U.S. is allergic to, basically, when it comes to politics.
So people get mistaken, like people, like, the bad faith actors, they always assume, and people are like, "Oh, you're a Putin puppy." I'm like, guys, no, I do not give a fuck about Putin. I am just rooting against the West. I am very clear about that. I shared a meme before, like, I'm not against Putin. I'm rooting against all these motherfuckers. It was NATO leaders and the Western leaders, because what they did to our people, what they did to the working class, the Cold War. I'm trying to phase that phrase out, like, because I remember one of my radical friends was like, "Don't call it the Cold War. It was a global economic war against the poor." And I was like, "Damn, was that you?" Someone told me that. I was like, "Damn, I like that." But anyway, let's get to a little bit more of this article. I don't know if I'm gonna read the whole thing because this article get really into the weeds. But I do think it's important to do these breakdowns on the channel every once in a while. So I'm gonna start from the beginning. Seldom has the West so grossly misjudged an economy's global significance. This French economist said, explained recently that the war in Ukraine has made us realize that the Russian economy is considerably more important than we thought. One big reason for this miscalculation is the exchange rates. This is what I tried to explain the best I could, right? If you compare Russia's gross domestic product by simply converting it to rubles to US dollars, you get an economy the size of Spain's, right? This is what, like, Lindsey Graham and what a lot of people will mock, where they're like, "Oh, Russia got their economy is not shit. We could easily win an economic war against them." Wrong, right? And he's saying, he explains that comparison make no sense when you look at the PPP. This is what I was trying to explain to you guys. And that accounts for productivity, standards of living, resource use, and then explain how all the institutions that use it, like the IMF, as I was explaining earlier, and this is how Russia's economy compared to Germany when you use this measure. He said, when you measure Russia's GDP based on PPP, it's clear that Russia's economy is actually more the size of Germany. About 4.4 trillion for Russia versus 4.6 trillion for Germany. From the size of a small, somewhat ailing European country to the biggest economy in Europe and one of the largest in the world. You guys see the miscalculation the West starts to make? And then they get into some more now. I'm going to see if what's a good part here. They explain the service sector difference here a little bit right here. I'm trying to get to an important point. I think this is a point I was trying to make with the Netflix Nestle comparison. He said this makes sense this is after explaining the difference, right? When push comes to shove, we know there is more value in providing people with the things they really need to survive, like food and energy, than there are intangible things. This is the U.S. economy, the service-based economy. So this is the Netflix Nestle example. When a company like Netflix has a price-earning ratio 3 times higher than Nestle, the world's largest food company, is more likely not a reflection of the market than the physical reality. Netflix is a great service, but as long as an estimated 800 million people in the world remains undernourished, Nestle is going to provide more value. So what they're saying is, even though Netflix is way more profitable, more people are using the service, Nestle is a more valuable product because it's actually feeding people despite this. Now, we can go into child slavery and all that. There's a long story on that. But you guys see the point that they're making, right?
And it's an interesting point also, Nick, because what's happening is that if you're going to go with a neoliberal global economic model, be careful what it is you're good at producing, because if suddenly there's a crisis and you don't produce things like food and basic necessities, which is what you're calling attention to, Netflix is not a basic necessity compared to some of the things that other companies make, then you're going to find yourself in trouble in terms of relying on that finance, capital, service-based economic model. It's going to come back to bite you because you need to produce stuff. And we stopped doing that a while back because we just exported all that labor to supposed third world countries to pay people a lot less money.
Now, they get into a little bit what we were talking about earlier, Carlos, and the myth that there's a united global community against Russia. And after doing, I skipped a lot of like technical explanation. They go in a little bit historical references. They talk about China and how they produce stuff. But this really gets into the heart of the miscalculation by the West, right? I'm going to just read from here. A tally of countries participating in current sanctions on Russia, in fact, makes it hard to say whether a new iron curtain is being drawn around our adversaries or around the West itself. Do you see what he said there? So he said it's not Russia being sealed off, it's the West. Countries and nominal U.S. allies, as significant as India and Saudi Arabia, have been particularly vocal in their refusal to take sides in the conflict in Ukraine. This is why Biden is going to Saudi Arabia on bent knee. Remember the campaign promises that Biden made that he gonna hold Saudi Arabia accountable? They gonna make Saudi Arabia a pariah state. That's what he said on the campaign trail. Complete 180. Remember, he literally lifted the sanctions off Venezuela. That's how fucked up. That's how much they fucked up. It was like, God, we gotta lift the sanctions on Venezuela. Get some oil. Guys, I cannot overstate how much they fucked up. So even let me continue before I get Carlos' take on here. This is the most important paragraph, I think, when I read this article earlier. One telling barometer for this dynamic is oil. With Western oil sanctions on the world's largest exporter, prices have predictably skyrocketed, rising from 75 a barrel to the beginning of the year to over 110 today. But countries that have refused to participate in sanctions are now taking advantage of the opportunity to negotiate with Russia for energy deliveries at steep discounts. So now this is the question I want to ask you guys. This is the question I want to ask DSA, Bernie Sanders, and the progressives who believe you're going to win this economic battle. Remember, the quote from DSA said they want more sanctions on Russia. They want more economic war. This is the question. If Russia is able to sell oil around the world, countries like India are able to negotiate for below market prices. Western consumers are being hammered with inflated prices. In this scenario, who's really being sanctioned? Are the countries who get market value prices on Russian oil, are they being sanctioned? Or the Western countries who have Putin derangement syndrome, are they being sanctioned? This is why you guys think I'm so upset at the progressive movement, and they sunk even lower than I thought was possible. So when Bernie Sanders and progressives vote for that package and when they support this proxy war, they are sanctioning the working class. Carlos, the people who claim they're socialists, the people who claim they're on the left in this country, is sanctioning the working class of this country.
That's how strong the propaganda machine is. That's how strong it is that they can get the left of this country in order to, under this Cold War paranoia that they've managed to resurrect, basically to pass sanctions against their own working class people that they constantly campaign for as far as their constituents. This is really turning out bad for the U.S. because I don't think they anticipated all the countries that they've been dismissing are now doing business with Russia. How do you come back from that, Nick? That's my question to you. Like, how do you come back from paying cheaper prices to one country for oil to going back to the guy that was schooling you for a lot more money before that?
Dude, I'm still thinking about the long-term consequences of what this is going to... Like, we can only theorize, bro, the long-term consequences of what this is going to mean for Western hegemony and the U.S. dollar. But, man, they really fucked up. And people who are just joining the side of the West for the goal of mutual assured economic destruction. It's insane. And that's why I said we're the most propagandized country. As you mentioned earlier, Carlos, like there are other countries that has propaganda, guys. But is there any other country that's propaganda is so good? Their propaganda hits so hard, they convince people who call themselves socialists into endorsing, sanctioning the working class in order to finance the Western expansion of NATO. And I will say that again because that's exactly what happened. Bernie Sanders and the squad decided to sanction the American people because they wanted to financially facilitate the Western expansion of NATO. Sorry, the eastward expansion of NATO. That's what this is about. So I'm gonna read the last part. Let me read the last part, pass right to you, Carlos.
Yeah.
Before I go on another rant. I think the last part is important too. A similar principle applies to the weaponization of the US dollar and the Western financial system in general. If non-Western countries are increasingly told that access to the dollar and transactions like SWIFT are conditional on the policies made by Washington, that can change on the fly. That may not be necessarily in their own best self-interest. The result may be the de-dollarization of the global economy, not strengthening the Western order. That's exactly the point we were making earlier, right, Carlos?
And that's the scary point, right? Because that's the end of the petrodollar. That's it. And that ends U.S. world domination economically, because now we're going to go to a completely different system if this doesn't turn out the way the U.S. wanted, which is not. It's not what's happening right now. And it's ironic, it's going back to the most propagandized country. Most U.S. media is not covering this, and they keep talking about how Russia is suffering economically. But if you actually look at the numbers, that's not the way it's going down.
I've been watching a lot of corporate news just so I can tell you guys what they've been saying. Guys, the way that MSNBC have been presenting this war, they've been saying the Russian people are suffering. They had enough. They wish they can overthrow Putin, but they live in a tyrannical government. So even though they want to overthrow Putin, they just can't. Guys, and I'm going to give you guys a low number just in case I get it wrong, but Putin approval rate is around 70%. It may be higher. I'm going to give you guys the conservative number. So his approval rating like 70%. Biden's like 40%. And speaking of Lula, do you guys know when Lula was president, his approval rating was in the 80 percentile range? You guys know that? The socialist leader had approval rating in the 80s. Putin had approval rating in the 80s. Compare the approval ratings of these countries to our leaders. 90%. Look at the chat. Guys, if you guys have a better number, let me know. I use the conservative number because I don't want to be like wrong. I on top of my head, I think it's at least 70%, but this person says Putin has a 90% approval rating now. Jesus. And that makes sense because I know it's going higher because a lot of Russian people, they see this as a necessary battle because if not now, then when? I've been asking people from the very beginning, I'm anti-war. I want to find a solution that does not lead to war. But as someone, I'm critical of the West because I believe the West had all the chips on their side. Now, considering that Russia is surrounded by U.S. military bases, when you consider the fact that they was killing 14,000 ethnic Russians, banning the Russian language, right, building up Nazis and hostile Russian influence on the border, my question has been, people, what was the alternative for Russia? And I heard some people say, well, they could have used the Nord Stream pipeline as a negotiation. Guys, they tanked that immediately. That shit was no negotiation. They had no negotiation power, and the West knew it. They was gonna keep going and going and going, keep probing, keep escalating, keep putting more military bases, keep killing more Russians until this happened. And that is my analysis. And I am open to hearing other people take on this. Like if someone can explain to me the steps that Russia could have taken, I'm down to hear it. But I don't see it. The West put them in a corner where they had to do this because, as we explained on the show many times, every other country would have done the same in the same situation. Imagine the United States reaction, and we was building up Nazis on the Mexico border that had anti-American sentiment, that was banning like the English language. We had military bases everywhere. But go ahead, Carlos. Go ahead.
No, we see that with Cuba, right? We saw the aggressive reaction they had with Cuba when they had the communist overthrow there in the Cuban Revolution. The United States responded very aggressively to that. And in many ways, what we're seeing right now, and what you're saying that Russia is basically responding to, is the expansion of U.S./European Western imperialism. Basically, they're trying to push that model more eastward. And at the end of the day, it reminds me of being on the street and when you're having a confrontation with someone that's verbal, but you see people starting to move around you and surround you little by little, and like, oh, I see what's going on. You're flanking me because you guys are about to jump me, and I can read that. And if you're intelligent enough, you're going to respond to that with self-defense. You're going to say, like, I'm not allowing this person to get, and then because before you know it, you're surrounded. And that just reminds me of, like, what I would do in that situation is I would be preemptive. And I think that's what Russia is doing in that situation. If I'm being surrounded, I need to be preemptive. And I'm just going to start with Ukraine. I mean, and I think plenty of people have said it. This is not a full-fledged war with Ukraine. This is just a way of initiating a conversation that nobody wants to have in terms of that eastward expansion of NATO, because NATO keeps ignoring it. NATO keeps breaking the treaties, and they're breaking them again by allowing Finland and Sweden to join. So.
Yeah, and I explained this concept before. I'm gonna do it again just for the sake of this live stream. Like, if you are on the ground in Russia, you have a lot of criticism of this war. I heard one criticism I thought was really good, coming from a leftist perspective, like a Russian leftist perspective. Because he was saying, one criticism I heard of Putin was, if your goal, like many leftists in Russia want to stop the expansion of NATO. So they say, okay, if we want to stop the expansion of NATO, we want to end Russian hostility, this invasion was the worst way to do it, because now NATO is expanding. So that was you can say that's a misstep. But I leave those criticisms to people in Russia, on the ground in Russia, because as Chomsky said, now as any anti-imperialist will acknowledge, as someone who lives in the imperial core, it's my job to hold our government responsible. What am I gonna do to hold Putin responsible? Sanction myself? There's nothing that we can effectively do. So when looking at a conflict like this, I'm looking at everything the West did wrong, because this is the government I hold accountable. And there's plenty of blame to be had on our side too, right? Now, if I was in Russia, maybe I'd be blaming Putin. I'd be like, yo, maybe you should be making this step, make this step. But as a black man in this country, you cannot make the argument on why I should focus more on another country instead of the wrongdoings our country did that led to this situation. That's why our being coverage is the way we do. Are we clear? Carlos, you want to chime in? I think you want to do.
Because I just want to say that, just to push back a little bit on that, Nick, think of American exceptionalism and how that's also exported as a propaganda to other countries. So I'm just thinking of those leftists in Russia right now basically saying, oh, we could have done it. If the point was to weaken NATO, we're strengthening NATO. Well, sometimes you need to think, you need to have a fight, a confrontation, a difficult conversation with someone, and sometimes you need to take it there because it's been lingering for a while. And so if NATO has been expanding, and we can see the numbers, you can see the countries, decade after decade, a new country joins NATO, new bases are established, and they get closer to Russia. I think what Russia did at this moment is basically say, look, we're living in a completely emerging, different type of new world order, so we're going to have to push this issue to a head and see what happens. I'm going to go all in that they're going to do this, and I think the U.S. and NATO responded the way that I think Putin expected is they're going to give them back financial and military, but at the end of the day, are they going to alienate the rest of the world? We've seen the maps. Half the world, if not more, is not in favor of sanctions, is not in favor of supporting either NATO or Russia at this point, but they are making deals with Russia because those markets are starting to open up. I think that Putin this is like a very intense, long poker game. And I think what Putin is doing is saying, like, it may look like I'm losing at times, but I'm betting on all those other countries that the West has alienated.
Bro, even the media, I saw the shift. I also think the shift is also so they can help sell more arms. I think I do think it's multi-pronged. But even they've been admitting that Russia is going to win. But they're doing it for different reasons from what I say, right? The reason why they were saying it because they wanted like, oh, Russia's gonna win, we need to sell more arms. That's why they say it, right? But it's still rooted in the truth that Russia always was gonna win this conflict, right? So my question to people who like, if you're really concerned with NATO buildup and anti-Russian escalation, do you guys know, for example, under Donald Trump, the quote-unquote Putin puppet, he launched CIA infrastructure, financial attacks, cyber attacks, and Russian infrastructure. So if you believe in defending one's homeland, right, this battle has to happen eventually, because the idea that he was going to use that pipeline with Germany as negotiating table, that wouldn't last. That he was willing to tank that at any given time. So what do? Do you let this keep escalating? Do you allow the CIA to launch cyber attacks into your infrastructure? Do you allow ethnic Russians to be bombed, right, in Ukraine? That's when you guys had a cultural heritage that goes hundreds and hundreds of years. And now this is a complicated, long conversation about what should be done. Why, like, there's so many moving parts to what caused the conflict and the fact that this started in 2014. This is why the media portrayed the conflict as they did. Carlos, I watched the media and it was like Putin just snapped one day. They were trying to pretend this is just Putin. They're doing that because they don't want you to talk about the issue itself. They want you to think, oh, Putin is just a madman who went crazy and lost his invasion, even though he got Senate approval. Something that the United States that never happened here. But I want you to chime in. Go ahead, Carl.
If you're even halfway intelligent and you read these articles and you just start to compare it, it's like interesting because Ukrainians cannot stop suffering, but at the same time the Russians can't stop losing. So I don't know how both things can be going on at the same time, but they're both going on at the same time, right? Always all these stories about Ukrainians are surviving barely, all these people are suffering, and Russia just can't stop losing. They're retreating. Nothing that Russia's doing is working. So that I hear you on the mainstream media, but it's also this idea of like going back to the Russians in Russia, and this idea. You're absolutely right. I mean, after a while, you are going to have to. That Cold War is going to stop being cold and it starts going to get warmer and warmer. And in many ways, we never did stop. The Cold War never ended. It just became this. And so at the end of the day, what we're seeing is the contradictions, the shortcomings, the failures of global neoliberal capitalism. And I think if you're a socialist, if you're anywhere near leaning as a nation or as an individual towards the left, you're calling out this structure that never worked in the first place and saying, like, it never worked. It's not working for most of the nations in this world, and you want to keep maintaining it through military force. We're done with that. We're calling it bluff. Let's see if it lasts. Let's see who's eating at the end of the day if we're not trading anymore in terms of the traditional, what we used to do. We're just going to trade among nations that get along. The U.S. is going to trade with Europe, and that's basically it, and Australia. We can't make it with the populations we have in terms of just producing food. We don't produce that much.
When you guys study history, hell, even current events, you guys notice establishment, they use the same tactics over and over again. We talk about media hypocrisy. I'm trying to remember the exact scientific phrase for it, but it's the concept where you paint your enemy as being extremely weak, incompetent, while at the same time they are this strong, overcoming force that must be defeated. I've seen them do this propaganda in real time on the Russian war. So, guys, this is what they've been saying. They were saying, "Oh my God, Russia's military was embarrassed. Ukraine is doing surprisingly well in this war. Russia is shown as being incompetent. Putin made a miscalculation." At the same time they said this, they were saying, "Oh, we need Sweden and Norway to join NATO ASAP, or Russia's going to take them over." Which one is it? Is Russia this small, embarrassing military that can't even beat Ukraine? Or is Russia this giant military force that's about to take over Europe? They have these hypocrisies all the time, Carlos. I see it.
And how about the moral hypocrisy you highlighted earlier, Nick, in terms of like, oh, these people are authoritarian madmen, right? So Putin is one of these authoritarian madmen that we need to protect the world against. But when it's convenient, Saudi Arabia is ruled by an authoritarian madman. But at this current moment, we need that authoritarian madman. So we're going to start doing business with him. He's no longer an authoritarian madman. Now he's just, the leader of Saudi Arabia. The United States does this all the time. Osama bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, Noriega, Gaddafi. I mean, you could go down a list of leaders around the country that used to either work for us as CIA agents and or who we put in power. And at the end of the day, when we no longer need them, they become these authoritarian madmen that the U.S. is fond of putting in power around the world, right? So this is just another example. It's not only highlighting the political, economic hypocrisy of sanctions, it's also highlighting the moral hypocrisy of U.S. exceptionalism. We don't get to tell the world who the good guys and bad guys anymore because no one's listening. We've lost our credibility.
So the last thing I want to share with you guys, because I did like 2 hours on this idea. Like this whole, everything was connected. It was like 2 hours 7 damn near. Because you guys see the title of the video, Lula makes Bernie Sanders look like Ronald Reagan. And the reason why I want to cover this issue in depth, like this literally 2 hours, because I want to show you guys that it's literally unforgivable for a progressive to get this issue. Like, and I say progressive for a reason. You don't have to be as far left as me. Like, you don't have to be a Marxist. You don't have to be a socialist to get this issue right. It just shows how fucked up the U.S. left is. That's why Josana, and I even saw some people in the chat earlier that say, yo, Lula has some right-wing tendencies. We still have some criticism of Lula, right? Even though he's still significantly to the left of Bernie and everyone. But look how much he gets this issue better than everyone else. It's crazy. Last hint, because last receipt on this part, because this exposes the entire narrative, right? We got to take down Russia and Putin because they're this unique evil that suppresses human rights and they're responsible for war crimes. But at the same time, let's buy Saudi Arabia oil. You can't make this shit up. And this article is hilarious. I'm actually going to read a little bit of it. Because Biden to visit Saudi Arabia and push to lower oil prices and punish Russia. And let me see if I can close this. Because it's actually kind of funny. When they said, here it is. I'm going to read the first paragraph because I think it's funny. First reported by WAPO in New York Times, it suggests Biden has prioritized his need to bring oil prices down and punish Russia for its invasion of Ukraine over his stand on human rights. And that visit will be a planned trip to Israel too. So in order to stand up for human rights, we want to prop up Saudi Arabia and Israel. One state who literally committed a genocide, Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and Israel, who's ethnically cleansing Palestinians. So I did a quick update on Yemen earlier, but they did a ceasefire in Yemen.
I just sent you a link on Washington Post on Yemen, and it's an exclusive about the airstrikes and how the U.S. has been providing basically the military aid for all those. So basically they're saying, yes, there's a basically humanitarian crisis in Yemen. A lot of the people suffering from that are children, and the U.S. Has been providing support for that.
I'm going to see if I can find this other article, too. This is the article that Carlos shared. Saudi-led airstrikes in Yemen have been called war crimes. Many relied on U.S. support. We all know the U.S. and how they was complicit in the genocide in Yemen that now has a truce. They've been working on the truce and ceasefire for a long time, and they really was hammering down. They got done like last week because they had a truce earlier, and then you had the Saudi Arabia-backed coalition that was breaking the truce because part of the truce was that they would stop blocking medicine at the ports. So then they were still blocking medicine at the ports when they did the ceasefire in March. So then in response, the Houthi rebels started launching attacks. And then the mainstream media was like, the Houthi rebels breaking the ceasefire. This is why we got funded genocide. No, y'all motherfuckers broke it first because they were blocking medicine. So that was the first ceasefire attempt earlier this year. And then they hammered this next one down. And we would never know how they did it. And the reason why I say this, guys, they offered Saudi Arabia some incredible shit because they was like, God, we can't take Saudi Arabia oil while you guys are literally fucking doing the genocide. You guys are literally doing war crimes while we are saying Putin committing war crimes. So I'm gonna try to find an article because you guys know I always try to show receipts. But they literally forced them to get this truce done so they couldn't have that hypocrisy on. So like, oh, end this genocide in Yemen real quick. So now we can take your oil. That's why, remember the story we just reported a few days ago? How you had the progressives, including the squad led by Cori Bush. They finally presented a letter to Joe Biden like, we need to end the genocide in Yemen. Guys, the reason why they sent that letter is because it was already ending in the first place. just to show you guys the difference between the two. One last thing I'll pass back to you, Carlos. I made this point before earlier. Bernie Sanders introduced a resolution to end the genocide in Yemen under Donald Trump. So why, when Joe Biden became president, why didn't you do it again immediately? So that got done when the Senate and the Congress was more red than it is now. It became more blue when Biden won. So it made no sense not to put that Yemen proposal up. So why did he do that? Because the United States still had to continue to prop the war up until now, right? So and Bernie didn't want to put that resolution up because then Biden would be forced to veto it. But go ahead, Carlos. I'm gonna get you in there.
No, I was just going to jump on that. Basically, it's very interesting to watch Bernie maintain the integrity of the Democratic Party in terms of policy when he could blow the whole thing up right now. He could be the independent voice that is anti-war, pro-American working class, which is what he campaigns on. But at the end of the day, we're just watching him hand everything over again to party integrity, which is what maintains the duopoly. So I think that in terms of people showing you who they are, nations showing you what their agendas are about, we're watching Bernie just basically burn his independent status by basically maintaining the status quo and the integrity of the Democratic Party by not challenging or even talking out loud about this stuff. I mean, there's no anti-war political representative right now in the United States of any clout that's coming out and saying, like, we shouldn't be going to, I mean, and you have to, point to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Rand Paul. It's like, man, when your politics is aligned with people like that, the government's breaking.
And guys, I know I keep going back to Bernie and the Squad, but you guys see the title of this video. I put that title like this so you guys can click on it, but I told you guys anything I say, I can back up. So the title of this video is Bernie Sanders make Lula Lula make Bernie look like Ronald Reagan. And I think throughout the course of this 2-hour stream, you guys can see why that is and why getting this issue is so, like, it's such an exposing moment. So after the stream, I'll leave them alone for a little bit because that's the whole point. I'm making this argument on why the United States left sucks. Now, this is what I was mentioning earlier. Now, check this out. Look at the strategy by Biden. So it said Biden welcomes Yemen truce extension, notes Saudi Arabia's courageous leadership. The courageous. He's kissing their ass. You notice this, Carlos? Guys, they kiss. They push this truce, and God, I promise you, we would not know what they got for doing this because there was still a lot of tension. I gotta read a little bit more so I can do a better job presenting it. But there's another article I can show you guys that there's still a lot of tension despite the truce, showing that this pretty much was forced on. Like, guys, if you guys do this, we will fucking give you a ton of money. Like, we will make your day anything you want. Just please, we cannot have this hypocrisy hang on our head while we take your oil. So you see how Biden now propping up Saudi Arabia after his campaign promises of bringing them to heel.
Yeah. So suddenly these war criminals are no longer war criminals. A, the hypocrisy, right? We're just from one day to the next, they go from being war criminals to courageous leaders. And then B, are we sure? Are we confident? Do we trust this government and the deal they're going to strike with Saudi Arabia is actually trickling down to help the working class in terms of gas prices? Let's be real. Let's be honest. Like, no.
Yeah, there was just another one. I want to show you guys another one. Look, White House praises Saudi royals. You mean this dude is one of the biggest human rights violators in the world right now? Jesus Christ! You see, they now sucking up to the royal family of Saudi Arabia. Dude, guys, you see the geopolitical politics in this? They try to get that oil because they fucked up.
Yep.
They made a giant miscalculation. And I hope we made that clear. And Bernie Sanders was part of that. He was part of getting all that put together. And we are being sanctioned. And that's what we were being sanctioned to expand NATO, right? So actually, I'm gonna get your last thoughts on that. I think I spent a lot of time on the topic. I want to do one more though. But any last thoughts you have on that, Carlos? Now we'll move on to the next.
On this topic, I'm just going to say this is why the United States is a police state, because we basically maintain that mindset. And when other countries like Saudi Arabia are blatantly authoritarian, they have a guy who basically kidnaps, tortures journalists when they're trying to get their marriage license in other countries. This guy's capable of sending hitmen to other countries to take care of a problem, in this case, a journalist. When we are that hypocritical, that police state in this country becomes less and less justifiable, which is why it's very easy to not talk about what happened again in Texas basically a week ago, but it's starting to happen in this country. They're starting to do that, and we can't forget that this is all interconnected, and it goes back to weapons, military-industrial conflicts, and how do you maintain control, not only in your house, but outside your house. How do you control your neighborhood in this case, which for the United States is basically the entire world?
Well said. I'm going to just read some of the super chats I see here. Hopefully I didn't miss too many. Keep the super chat coming. I may get to them by the end of the stream. Saturday is going to be a long stream. I got a lot to talk about today. I really do want to get to the next two stories. So I guess this should be a long stream for me today. Thank you for the $2. None of your business. Biden has always been a shill to stop. Biden has always been a shield to stop a third party. I don't know if you mean Bernie there, but everyone knows Biden's part of the Democrat Party. But anyway, thank you for super chat. I think you mean Bernie there. I might be wrong though. Get finished Bolshevik on RBN, please. I'm always down for guest suggestions. Thank you for that. Now, the next story, we are shifting gears because we've been talking about Russia, Ukraine in some way for the last 2 hours because that was the main standout point in terms of showing you guys the difference between like the global South leftists who are actually strongly against U.S. empire and imperialism and Bernie Sanders. Now I'm gonna shift gears to the current narrative on guns, but it's not gonna go the way you guys think it's gonna go because as CJ has been explaining, the Uvalde police shooting and these mass shootings, the story is about how our police has failed to protect us. It's not about gun control. Liberals are trying to make it about one thing. It's not about that. Our police are incompetent. They do not solve crimes. In the Uvalde police situation, they was complicit with this crime, right? But they are trying their best to shift the conversation from that to gun control. Now, you guys know I have a disagreement with them on Marxist. I believe in Marxist ideology, especially in the U.S. empire. I do not believe that we should be disarmed. But that's not necessarily where I'm going with this. I want to show you guys this falsehood that Biden has promoted multiple times. And he gave a recent speech on guns. And listen to this lie, which is hilarious. I'll let it speak for itself.
We should repeal the liability shield that often protects gun manufacturers from being sued for the death and destruction caused by their weapons. They're the only industry in this country that has that kind of immunity. We should repeal the liability shield that often protects gun manufacturers from being sued for the death and destruction caused by their weapons. They're the only industry in this country that has that kind of immunity.
The only industry that has this sort of immunity. Guys, he has repeated this bullshit multiple times, and liberals are just going with it. So this was me and my mate today. I was kind of proud of it. I was a little bit proud of it. Because he keeps saying it. Say the line. Gun manufacturers are the only industry that has immunity to lawsuits. The idea of this is beyond hilarious, considering recent events. I remember recently I had a tweet. A lot of people agree with it, but it's super funny. The lockdown left, as Jimmy calls them, they put back on me because I was like, I didn't even say anything that was anywhere near anti-vax. But if you don't repeat the big pharma talking points, you're considered anti-vax. I literally said that if you got the vax and you was injured, because I know people who have been injured. If you got the vax and you was injured, big pharma should take that $1,000 per second that they was making, and they should pay people who was injured by the vaccine. They get an immunity shield for that. Once again, how is that an anti-vax statement? I'm literally saying if you got the vaccine, got injured, big pharma who made record profits should pay you for that. But people was like, how dare you? How dare you suggest that big pharma shouldn't get all the profits, all the insane profits that they made through the vaccine? There are people who are so-called socialists who was upset at that take. I'm like, y'all motherfuckers are defending big pharma profits now? Is that what we doing? So, and then I also said, I don't remember who I was when I said this. It was a few shows ago. And I'm like, if you want people to get vaccinated, my socialist approach is you should pay them. Pay them to get vaccinated. Like, none of these are anti-vax takes, but people consider them to be. But the point was, the idea that Joe Biden believed that gun industry is the only people who can't get sued when big pharma literally have multiple, like they release drugs all the time with fucking with protection for being sued. The cops, you can't get civil lawsuits. Like, it's so crazy to believe that this is their talking point. But propaganda works. If you repeat it over and over and over again, people will eventually believe it. And this is why Joe Biden kept repeating it over and over. But Carlos, I would love to get your thoughts on this.
You're absolutely right, because big pharma is one of the most corrupt industries that we know of, right? In terms of pushing drugs on people, allowing drugs that have harmful side effects and not reporting it, raising prices arbitrarily on drugs that basically save lives, like the EpiPen, and that whole fiasco that happened. The fact that people don't understand that this is one of these corporations, and the only reason you hear them, you hear about them on the news is because they pay fines or they have to pay lawsuits. It's because they break the law. So the fact that the gun industry technically, and what happened in Texas, if you want to go by legal standards, they didn't break any laws. So I don't know how you're going to go after them legally. Pharmaceutical companies, you can, but this one, you're going to have to take a stand. And in terms of the laws that they're trying to do, I think they're going to try and use this. And a lot of people on both sides are very attentive to this, is they're going to try to basically weaken and defang a population so that the police state works a little more functionally, a little more smoothly, because you're going to have people both on the left and the right who are very dissatisfied with this government, now lacking the necessary means to engage in self-defense. And the problem with this, Nick, is that it taps into some of these like white supremacist fantasies about a race war when they come for your guns. Like there's some books out there like the Turner Diaries that are based on the fantasy of white people being a minority, the United States being run by these liberals that are, you know, basically a multicultural government. And the first thing they do is white people's AR-15s are the first thing they confiscate, and it leads to a race war. And Timothy McVeigh to Dylan Roof read these books, and it's a fantasy of what, and we're manufacturing it. We're literally creating the conditions for that fantasy to come true. So it's almost like they're fueling this fire. And I don't know if it's an agenda or just ineptitude, but this is not going to go well based on the way they want to go about it. Because there's going to be a lot of people that's like, I'll give up my weapons when the police give up theirs, and that's going to bring that conflict to a head. Because now you're going to have a state saying, why does our population demand to be armed continually in a manner that matches our police force? And the truth is, because we don't trust the government. If we trusted the government, we wouldn't feel the need to arm ourselves. If we had general universal health care, we might take the vaccine without questioning it, because we're used to our government being interested and invested in our health. Thus, if there's a vaccine, like in other countries, they have universal health care, people don't have a problem. They wear masks, they take the vaccine. It's not a big deal because it's part of everyday life. In this country, a government doesn't give a shit about you dying, suddenly wants you to take this vaccine so their economy can go back to normal, and you may have an adverse reaction to the vaccine. You may want to know more about it. Why? Because it's a trust issue. We don't trust our government. We want to be armed. We don't trust our government. We want more information about this mandated vaccine.
Now let's talk philosophy here just a little bit. Let's do some thinking here, because the idea, because obviously there's the obvious examples, right? Like Pfizer, their immunity, the immunity that police gets is as well. Let's think about it like this. You guys know the case of Steven Donziger, right? Where he led a lawsuit. What country was it? Was it Bolivia? What indigenous people he fined for? Anyway, the point is Chevron was polluting the environment of this indigenous community. I forgot exactly what country it was. And he won that lawsuit. And then Chevron led a corporate prosecution on him. So once again, this is philosophy, right? And then when you look at that trial, the judge,
Chevron lawyer? That's what Samir's saying.
Yeah, the Chevron led Steven Donziger, right? Yeah. Bolivia. Wait, I see a few people saying there. Yeah. Chevron led a corporate prosecution against them for that. And the judge was literally paid off by Chevron and their affiliates. And they got him house arrest for years, violated constitutional rights because he led that lawsuit into Chevron. So once again, this is a philosophical debate, right? Doesn't that mean that companies that pollute the environment like Chevron, don't they have a form of a liability shield in the way how the system is built, right? This is talking about corporate fascism. I had a debate with Destiny. There's the philosophical debate that we have. Like they're the established definition of fascism, the merging of corporation and state. We have Chevron that literally have judges that are bought off, that leave the execution to a legal execution to a lawyer like Steven Donziger, and that's completely legal. Isn't that it? Not technically liability, but isn't it philosophically the same thing? You can't sue these motherfuckers. But anyway, I would love to get your thoughts on this.
No, that's a great point, because at the end of the day, it makes me think about the concept of what a corporation
It was
is, right?
Ecuador. Sorry, I just want to correct. It was
Oh,
Ecuador. That was the country. Sorry, I blank on some of the details sometimes, but it was
no,
Ecuador.
and I see him on Twitter all the time. Like, I got 3 days to go. I got 2 days to go. You know, when he was advertising his house arrest, and he was released, I think, like 10 days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. He was finally able to get out. But I think an excellent point that you bring up is the concept that the Supreme Court, a very conservative Supreme Court, ruled that corporations are people. That was genius on their end, because essentially what it allows, you can't put a corporation in prison. So the people that run the corporation basically shield themselves behind what a corporation was reinterpreted as being. The original corporations that were established in the 1800s were basically neighbors coming together and saying, we're going to build a bridge that's going to benefit the town, but we don't want to be individually responsible in case the bridge falls apart, because we're doing you all a favor in the first place. So we're going to create this thing called a corporation, and think of the concept, right? You cooperate. It's almost like a co-op. You have a corporation of people coming together to build something that's going to benefit society, and at the end of the day, none of those individuals can be held responsible. The bridge just happens to break. Makes sense. You transfer that idea into the private sector, where people are profiting off of the use of the bridge. So now you're making money off of people crossing that bridge on a daily, but you still don't want accountability and responsibility in case the bridge breaks. You can't have it both ways, but that's what a modern capitalist corporation is. It's a entity that has it both ways, because it has no accountability, yet it can charge you what it wants. And at the end of the day, because it's an entity that is run by people, but also a person, you can sue the person, Chevron, but the people that run Chevron are not going to prison. The people that run Chevron are not going to go to jail, which is why you still have the same bankers in Wall Street that were responsible for 2008. You still have the same oil executives running the same oil companies that were responsible for the BP Gulf Stream spill. They're having these spills constantly. It's an environmental disaster. That costs a lot of money, and we don't hear about it because, again, it's all part of this gigantic system that we call the political economy of the United States, and it's capitalist. And so, you know, you have to control what kind of news people get, because if people keep hearing there's an oil spill every day, they might question that industry's accountability and whether or not they're doing their job right.
And this is what I'm trying to explain to the American exceptionalist people. When we look at the definition that they want to use, that when we're looking at dictatorial power, we are talking about the dictatorial power of capital. Capital controls the society in every shape or form. And our great friend Zoya's life, she says, who could have thought lobbyists writing the laws would shield corporations for consequences? And as Marxists, well, I'm not gonna assume you guys are Marxists. As Marxists, I want to break this kind of dissonance of people in this country that believe that we live in this free country where everything is decided by merit. No, we live in a society that has central planning that's planned by the capitalists. And since they planned it, it is rigged by the capitalists. And our conversation actually leads perfectly to our next story, that we cover. Our last story. It shouldn't be a long one, but I think this connects perfectly. Once again, we're gonna make the argument that we live in a corporate fascist state. So hang in with me, because you guys know I like to frame my stories. So I'm gonna paint a story for you guys here. So Eric Adams, I have Eric Adams derangement syndrome. I admit it. Because he's horrible. Like, this dude is literally everything I fear when I look at a black congressional oligarch. This is the black liberal I warn you guys about.
There's nothing wrong with being obsessed with an emerging fascist, because, you know, we could have caught Hitler early on when he was supposed to spy on the Nazis and then ended up running the Nazis. That would have been a very interesting moment to analyze. So there's nothing wrong with being obsessed with Eric Adams, Nick. Don't apologize.
See, I always mock people for having Trump derangement syndrome, but we all know that their politics is deeply unserious. Like, I had Jim Clyburn derangement syndrome. I got Joe Biden derangement syndrome, because I know what these motherfuckers did to our community. Look at Eric Adams in the war against homelessness that he's waging. I got laser focus on people who in the systems that lead to the destruction of our communities, right? But anyway, let me get to the story here. Mayor Adams sends stern letter to NYC employees. You are required to report to work in person. You fucking peasant. I'm just playing. He might as well said that. You might as well say this. So, have you guys noticed this push by capitalists to end working from home? Do you guys think this is a coincidence? So they were saying, "Oh my God, productivity is down. Productivity is down." I just read a study where most workers, like 60% of workers, report that they have been more productive ever since they've been working from home. Companies have reported higher productivity ever since they transferred from work from home. Right? So they come up with all these lies. There's been a ton of anti-working from home propaganda. What I found the most is that Fox Business. Like Fox Business, ever since the start of COVID crisis, they have been ramping up the propaganda about working from home, because working from home exposed like the way we formatted our uncivilized society, right? It showed that we really don't have to commute to these stupid fucking offices and see each other to be productive. It essentially debunked the way there are some jobs, there's a lot of jobs that need to be in person, so they are in person. But a lot of jobs you don't need to be fucking there. It's completely worthless. So why is there this push to get workers back into the office? Commercial real estate. Also, the auto industry. Because what happened if you, like, I'm trying to pull up the stat right now. I had an article I was reading that had all the numbers. I'm going to try to find it. But the amount of workers who, like, increased their working from home jumped significantly. I think, like, it was like 50, 60% of the workforce were working at home. What do you guys think that does to the auto industry? People paying for gas, car repairs. What do you guys think that does for commercial real estate who's renting out these spaces, right? So Eric Adams, who took a lot of money from commercial real estate, and a lot of the mayors are saying the same thing, they are now trying to push people getting back to work for commercial real estate. Let me read these studies here, and I'll love your take, Carlos. Study: remote workers are more satisfied than in-worker office employees. And the reason why I pulled this up is because they also mentioned this one here. A lot of these employers like, bro, if you let me go back in the office, I'm quitting. Look at this: 64% of employees will consider looking for a new job if asked to return to the office full time, because they realize people are realizing the hustle, right? They're more optimistic and satisfied. I got a few of these. Articles saved up. Just weeks after returning to the office, many Apple workers are unhappy and ready to quit. Now, this is the last article I'm gonna show you guys, because this is where things get really fucking screwy. This is where the argument towards corporate fascism that I was making spells out. So I explained to you guys, you got all these people that are working from home, millions of Americans that are working from home. I need to find that receipt with all the stats on there of the amount of people who work from home now. I didn't save it, damn it. But anyway, I'll show it to you guys. But there's a ton of people, millions of people that had to work from home. There are a ton of real estate lots that was empty. But despite that, commercial real estate is booming. Now, why is that? I'm trying to see if I can find this particular. I wrote it down. I don't want to spoil it. Actually, I guess I really had no choice, because you gotta really dive into this article, and they explain you had a lot of investors, BlackRock being them, a ton of corporate real estate and commercial real estate organizations that are investing into the commercial real estate lots because the prices went down when they saw people working from home, right? So now they have the giant problem where people do not want to go back from home, or they will quit. A lot of people are quitting their jobs. So Eric Adams and a lot of these mayors are forcing people to go back at home, because a lot of these people are heavily invested in the commercial real estate companies, right? So they're getting these massive donation in. So now the politicians are trying to facilitate with policy eliminating working from home, because they are paid by commercial real estate. Let's see if I can find the spot I'm looking for. Actually, I wrote it down because I knew I would have a hard time finding it. So here I wrote it down. I can't find the article. So here's what I wanted to find in the article. Recent data shows a record of 42 million square feet of space of commercial office space became available for lease in the second quarter and third quarter of 2020 and 2020. So a record amount of businesses became available for leases during COVID, right? 42 million square feet. So now you got a lot of investors investing in commercial real estate because they know the politicians are on their side. That's why Eric Adams is calling people to work in the office. So in the discussion about corporate fascism, what do you call it when you have a ton of investors that donate to politicians that is able to influence public policy, even when it doesn't make sense, like it doesn't affect productivity, anything?
But capitalism doesn't make sense, right, Nick? I mean, at the end of the day, capitalism, I mean, the joke is a capitalist will sell you the gun you need to shoot him, basically. So capitalism is, I mean, that was one of Marx's basic, one of the most important discoveries is that this is an economic system that's full of several types of contradictions, and eventually you're gonna encounter them, and that's why capitalism consistently has a crisis and engages in basically a version of socialism for a while, particularly for the population to keep them placated, and for corporations like in 2008 you bail them out. So capitalism knows that it doesn't function and it's going to break down once in a while, and it needs a little bit of socialism to rescue it, and then we go right back to square one until the next crisis happens. So you're absolutely right. There is more productivity, but just one thing that I wanted to raise to add to the fact that workers are going to return to a space where they feel alienated, right? And you feel better working at home if you have the type of job that lends itself to that. Imagine like what you're doing right now. If you had to go do this at a cubicle surrounded by people that you really don't get along with socially, but you have to work with, your productivity goes down. You're constantly under surveillance. It's the Henry Ford idea that I don't just want a worker, I want this worker to represent a certain type of citizen, that then goes back into the whole notion of nationalism and what it means to be an American. And they use the word American. I've seen in the chat that I don't use the word American to represent all of the Americas, obviously, but the United States appropriates that term because they want to spread that propaganda. They want to spread that whatever the United States does should define not only the nation, but the rest of the world. We export what the American dream is. We export what it is to be American, and that's why the entertainment industry is so important, to this propaganda and spreading this kind of stuff. So it doesn't make sense. Workers are going to be less productive. They're going to be more alienated. But what are the benefits for the landowners? What are the benefits for the people that run the corporation? You have more oversight. You have more surveillance. And at the end of the day, if you have a racist company, you're bringing back a lot of people that were very happy to be outside of that kind of hostile work environment back into that work environment. Because some of these people, Nick, just do it for petty reasons. It's just power trip.
Power.
Yeah. You're doing what you do basically at a call center, but now you have to go to the call center to do it from there.
Oh yeah, Elon Musk was another one of the people that was like, yeah, I think working from home is bad for people. Do you guys think it's a coincidence that the billionaire, it just so happened, like, yeah, I don't think work from home is a good idea. All the capitalists are saying it. If you guys are curious, I sometimes watch this shit because it's funny, like the propaganda is funny to me. Guys, just Google Fox Business work at home. They have done so many segments demonizing work from home. So I couldn't find my own receipt, but I think this receipt will work pretty well. You guys don't always like to back up what I say. This is an article. There's so many articles you can find like this. I'll just Google this real quick. The performance increase from people working at home. Performance can increase up to 13% by working from home. This is a study. The receipt I was trying to find, but I got lost in my bookmarks. Was the one where like 70% of workers, they self-reported that they got way more stuff done. So that's another good way you can track it. But then this one was an official study with 16,000 workers over 9 months found working from home increased productivity by 13%. So I'm asking you guys, if it's not about productivity, like they are saying, and I'll show you guys the other study showing that people are much happier working at home. Because believe it or not, I saw a few headlines where they was like, workers are actually not happy working from home. Guys, I can pull it out. I promise you. I promise to God, they tried that. It was like, there's so many people are unhappy working from home. They will gaslight us to oblivion if we allow them to. So if it had nothing to do with happiness, as we established, and if it has nothing to do with productivity, what is it about? Why do they want us to work from home so bad? I only could lead to corporate fascism, of them wanting to sell more commercial real estate, them wanting to get people back in their cars, spend money on gas, Go ahead.
I was going to say, Nick, and one of the important things that we need to remember about corporate fascism is that it's just not a one isolated thing. Fascism wants to control the totality of who you are as a human being, everything you represent as an individual. This is why, for example, in Nazi Germany, they had children basically, report their parents for talking to Jewish people or hiding Jewish people or not being patriotic enough, and then you get the Gestapo paying you a visit, and they would ask you a series of questions to test your loyalty. So corporate fascism, you're absolutely correct. What you have right now is a battle for branding and a battle to create certain corporate citizens that represent certain sectors. So the tech industry is engaging in their own version of creating their own little citizens, right? So Facebook has their own model of what it means to work at Facebook. Musk has his own model of what it means to work at. Amazon is going to have its own model of what it means to work at that. So suddenly corporations are not only engaging in, we want our workers to look a certain way, the way Disney used to do that, right? If you work for Disney, you're going to have facial hair. If you work at the park, you have to dress a certain way, etc. Now they're expanding that all the way to who you are as an individual. Why? Because they want to control your politics. They want to control what you do in your private time. They want access to that also. And Henry Ford, it was infamous for doing that. He would have a social army, and they would pay his workers a visit to check the way they live. How do you look and how do you represent the company when you're not on company time? Like, this is my private time, yeah, but we want to know if you're the right type of fit for a place like Ford. Now, are you the right type of fit for a place like Facebook?
Well said, my friend Carlos. Hope you got a little bit more time with me. I lied. There's one more story I want to do. This should be quick though. Saturday we can do 3 hours. I can do 3 hours. There's nothing. So I really want to talk about this last story. It's always fun talking to Carlos. Hopefully you guys enjoying the stream. If you are, please like, subscribe. If you are new, share to help us beat the algorithm. And if you want to continue to support our work, it allows us to do more streams. Sign up on Patreon. You also can do direct donations if you want to do that via Cashapp or Venmo. The links in the description. Please support the channel. But there's one more thing. This is a concept story and not current events. But I definitely want to have it with you on. If you guys don't know, I met Carlos earlier this year. He invited me on his show, and I had no idea what to expect because I knew he was some guy in academia. And despite what the mainstream narrative will have you believe, academia is not left, like full of shit libs and Zionists. So I remember when Carlos invited me on, I was like, I didn't know what to expect, but we immediately hit like that, man. I'm like, this dude fucking radical as hell. I love it. So it's always good having a conversation with Carlos. So I want to get your opinion on this because I've been trying to get people to start decolonizing their mind. Like, I love that phrase. I don't remember when I first heard it. I really wish I could tell you guys. It's one of the things I immediately when I heard it, like, yeah, that's it. That's the message that we need to get out there. So whenever I say stuff like U.S. is a fascist country, people like Destiny are like, what? That's how I got the debate. Because they're like, you can't back that up. And then Destiny learned real quick, yes, sir, I could easily back that up. And actually, it's very easy to make the argument that the United States is a fascist country. So,
Carl, you got to say corporate fascists, right? Because people immediately think we're not Nazi Germany. Look at all the rights we have. It's like, no, this is corporate fascism. It wants you to think you have all these rights until you want to actually exercise them. So you're absolutely right. But people tend to think of Nazi Germany as a fascism.
They only think of like one narrow thing, right? And that's exactly the point. So let's call this segment "Decolonizing Your Mind" with Nick and Carlos. So this is a great meme my friend Apollo shared, but it says everything. And it's also the language that I use. Like, when I use this language, people are shocked. But this is the decoder that you must have if your mind is decolonized, right? So let's go through each one of them individually. This will be our last segment for our long Saturday stream today, right? Especially in the midst of the Russia-Ukraine war. I have seen this shit used all the time. They use it all the time when they talk about China, when they talk about the DPRK, when they talk about any Western enemy, any enemy of the United States, they will use this shit, right? So look, if you're an enemy of the United States, you are called an oligarch. You remember these people, the Russian oligarchs? They're like, Putin is fine. Putin has backed by Russian oligarchs. Guys, Elon Musk has donated to Democrats his entire life until recently, 2020, right? So when you have Elon Musk, Bill Gates donate to your party, how is that not making them? How are they not an American oligarch? Now compare, like you gotta know the Walton family. If you take the Walton family, Bill Gates and Elon Musk alone, they have more wealth than all the Russian billionaires. All of them, just those three.
The connection between the Walton family and the Bush family, for example, the Walmart, the connection between people like I'm flipping on the name right now, but that contribute the Koch brothers, right? That are invested in conservative causes and establishing think tanks, and we never hear that term in the United States.
They're lobbyists, Carlos.
Yeah,
They're not oligarchs. They're lobbyists. You guys see why the United States is the most propagandized country. You see how slick they are.
politics, entrepreneur thing in this country, right? It's like, oh, they started a think tank because they're entrepreneurs, not because they're oligarchs or propagandists. They're entrepreneurs, and so
we have a few more. I love every single one of these. Authoritarian. Russia is an authoritarian country. China is an authoritarian country, but they imprison less people than we do, despite having over about 1 billion people. You see it? What they call authoritarian, we call law and order. What they call secret police, Russian secret police. We literally have undercover cops who they don't even have to announce themselves. Guys, you understand? A lot of developed societies think that's crazy. Like, we just have undercover. They infiltrate protests. They call them agent provocateurs. It happens all the time. Black Lives Matter, they was infiltrated. We literally called a Fed at the KC protest. I tweeted about it.
And the beauty there, Nick, is that the relationship between authoritarian and secret police is the backbone of a police state, right? That's how you maintain a fascist police state, is the relationship between authoritarianism and how do you do that? How do you maintain it? How do you discipline it? Well, you have a secret police. You have people out there with batons and guns that will discipline people into behaving if they're misbehaving. So in between law and order and undercover cops, you have the missing link between authoritarian and secret police. It's just your normal police, your normal cops. But that's the missing link that connects those two things and makes it work in places like the United States.
I love this. This was posted by Wyatt. We don't know who made it. Wyatt Reed. He was on the Anti-Imperialist Summit on RBN. Great anti-imperialist journalist. He tweeted this out. My friend Apollo sent to me. Much love to both of them. Love this stuff. Look, crush dissent is riot control. Guys, our police literally tear gases protesters here, which is a war crime. Tear gas is a war crime because for decades, the police have been lying about the effects that tear gas have on people. Like, if you have any sort of respiratory problems, which we learned through COVID-19 is very prevalent among our society. The liberals that fund the police, they're like, oh my God, there's so many people with preconditions that are going to die with COVID, but they don't care if they get tear gas. Isn't that funny?
Contaminates the water?
Yeah, contaminate the water. Women have miscarriages. People had asthma literally died. Like, I reported a story a long time ago. Someone who got tear gas ended up dying because they had an asthma attack in Seattle. This shit happens. But when we do it, it's just riot control. When Russia does it, they're crushing dissent against Putin. Y'all see how stupid it is? I don't see how people don't see it. I really don't. Well, I guess it's taking like 20 years, but whatever. But go ahead, Carlos.
And the thing is that dissent is also a word that's used very, in this country very freely, if you will, right? Because at the end of the day, you can have a peaceful protest, like many of the ones that, remember the Trump moment where he held the Bible upside down, right? Where most of the people outside protesting that day were clergy, basically people related to the church, and they got tear gas, and that's when Trump bunched out and all that stuff. That's still happening right now. Riot is a very interesting word because no one's rioting. They're just protesting, but we're going to call it a riot to crush it. Because you can't crush a protest. That just sounds bad, right? But you can crush a riot. You can loot, even if no one's looting. It's like, yeah, they're rioting and looting. They're criminals, so we need to stop that. And that's where you get the authoritarian, the secret police, all that other stuff. So it's interesting to see how it's interconnected, right? They're not just separate things, and it's an interesting word game. Like, they call it this, and then we call it that. It's also interesting how they're all connected, because without knowing it, they just map how the political economy of the United States is both created and maintained and disciplined.
I had to do this segment while I had Carlos on because I had this receipt saved for a while. I definitely wanted to do a discussion on this because I want you guys to know why I use the language that I do. I don't concede no ground. If you guys remember in the debate with Destiny, he was like, why use inflammatory language when you can't just play? Because I was telling him, like, label don't really matter that much. And then he was like, why use that inflammatory language then? I'm like, well, we got to break the propaganda somehow. And then I made my point. You guys saw the debate, right? Because they use the same propaganda. We gotta shatter, destroy their propaganda. But anyway, this is the next. All of these are good, but the next one is probably my favorite out of all of them because that's what they use against anyone who's not a capitalist state. They're like they threw into a gulag. They got thrown into a gulag. The Stalinist gulags. But meanwhile, we call that literally prison slave labor here. No one does it better than us. Our entire infrastructure of this country was built on slave labor, and then once we got the sham 13th Amendment, they started building infrastructure using prison slave labor. So that's my favorite one, especially as an abolitionist.
And another great thing to add to that, Nick, is the fact that this country is founded on the concept of quote-unquote prison labor if you use the model of the camp and the work camp, right, that the Nazis made famous because people worked themselves to death, and that was the whole idea. We're not going to kill them, we're going to work them to death. The United States started that, and the Nazis borrowed them. I mean, they studied the U.S. model that we established with indigenous people here. We called them reservations back then. They're basically death camps. People were dying of measles and stuff that we were, from blankets that we gave them and smallpox. But at the end of the day, the United States has been founded on settler colonialism. We created these camps. We created these prisons, essentially. And now, for example, for immigrants, for undocumented people, what do we call them? We call them immigration centers. We always find these nice words in order to mask what the political reality behind them is.
And that was George Carlin. He did his stand-up age so well, man. Like he did a segment on it. What is that, like 25 years now?
Yeah.
That was like 25 years ago he did a segment.
That's a great one. That's a really good one. Yeah.
I would love to play it, but they'll take us down so fast. No one shit age better than George Carlin, bro. There are a lot of comedians who had some edgy shit back in the day. Like Eddie Murphy is running from his old shit. I don't know if you heard him talk about his old what is it called, Raw? Like the famous,
the original where he's wearing the red leather.
Yeah, he came out and apologized for that segment so many times because it's so viciously and maliciously homophobic, like maliciously. So he apologized for that so many times. Chris Rock apologized for his that he did his house nigga segment. I don't know what else to call it other than that. He did a segment that pretty much white supremacists have quoted for years. He even apologized for that. George Carlin know how to apologize for a goddamn thing. This motherfucker been right from everything I've seen, right? But anyway, I'll go on a tangent here. Invasion intervention. You guys see how they use that? This is the most recent example is Somalia, right? Now, I love this example because, as someone mentioned before, the Donbass literally wanted Russians to liberate them from the fascist government the U.S. helped install with their coup, right? This was well established. There video footage, literally, of people in eastern Ukraine cheering when Russian soldiers came in because they didn't want to be part of the fascist Ukrainian state. So what the United States used to justify their Somalia invasion is they propped up a puppet government that was elected by 300 people. Literally, look it up. Literally 300 people selected their government. And then they're like, well, Somalia asked for help. The government asked for help in the same situation in Donbass. So they were like, well, I remember I called it, I was like, they invaded Somalia. No, the government asked for help. I'm like, okay, based on that, based on your logic, that means Putin didn't invade Ukraine then, right? Because Somalia is a deeply divided country, just like Ukraine, where both warring factions have committed human rights violations. The U.S. is just picking their favorite side, their puppet side, because the other Somali opposition said they want to have an independence from U.S. companies and get off the U.S. dollar. So they backed the current president now, who won by 300 votes, who now said we want U.S. intervention because the other government said we want U.S. out of our country and out of our problems. So you guys get the parallel, right? Invasion, intervention. This is how they always do it. We intervene in Iraq. That's why the fraudulent slip that George Bush did recently was so amazing.
Right? Yeah,
he like We gotta stand up to Putin on his unjustified, brutal invasion of Iraq. I mean Ukraine.
He tries to play it off like, you know, it makes a joke of it. But it's also interesting because if we do intervene, we're intervening to help people like freedom fighters not overthrow, engage in regime change against an authoritarian leader, right? So we're always on the side of the good guys, even if we're, you know, Oliver North ends up going to prison because we couldn't get Reagan to admit to what we were doing in Central America around that time, which is at the same time that we started importing crack into Los Angeles in order to fund that war that was going on in Central America because we're always too afraid of any Marxist or communist government getting too close to the United States. So no, it's fantastic. The hypocrisy that you're talking about, Nick, is very important because it's propaganda, as you always call it, but propaganda involves a lot of psychology. And when you can get people to change the way they talk about things, they start to change the way they think about things. And the softer your politics sounds, the softer you're going to think that stick hits those other nations. Thus, we don't invade, we intervene. There's a problem, so we have to go there. We don't have authoritarian police in this country. We have people that practice and establish and maintain law and order, right? So it's soft, even though you can see a video of Rodney King and Joe Biden saw the same video, right? How can you call that law and order? Well, maybe he's confessing to a crime. Like, what the fuck? Maybe he's confessing to a crime?
The Supreme Court literally just said if there's new evidence that will make someone innocent, that we're not looking at those evidence no more. Like, how is that not an authoritarian gulag ran by oligarchs and secret police? I'm just trying to use all the language on there. It's
the facade of democracy, right? The facade. Maintain the superficial, the spectacle that we have a separation of a branch. We have three branches that separate and check each other. Bullshit. They're all owned by corporations.
So let's get to the last few here. War crimes is collateral damage when we do it. And that's the language that you heard a lot during Barack Obama and George W. Bush.
Afghanistan, a lot of collateral damage in Afghanistan and Iraq.
I don't know if I heard it a lot from Trump just because I don't think Trump and them gave a fuck. They was like, man, y'all know what we doing. Fuck out of here. But during George W. Bush and Barack Obama, you heard the term collateral damage a lot. Yeah, man, the innocent civilians that we kill with drone strikes, man, you don't get collateral damage all the time in war. What can you do?
Yeah.
What can we do, man? But then when Putin, if one civilian dies, it's like Putin war crime tribunal. He's an insane oligarch. We gotta destroy the rest. Once again, I'm not saying that Putin's okay for doing that, but you see the different reactions. That's the point of the segment.
And that's
go ahead.
The human shield argument, right? It's like if one person goes to a wedding and you bomb the entire wedding, it's like, oh, well, they chose to go to a wedding. All the people there were shields. But if people in Ukraine are actually using human beings as civilians as human shields, that's a war crime. Whereas when we bomb them, as you correctly said, it's collateral damage. Even though we know that civilians are going to die, we're going to take that risk. You know, if 20 people are going to die at that wedding, well, you know, they used those people. No, they didn't. They attended a wedding. Whereas in Ukraine, they literally use people, civilians, and they keep them there with army members. And there's videos of that, right? They do the same thing in Israel. They capture a young Palestinian girl. You're going to stand in front of the Israeli soldiers so that Palestinians don't attack us. And so that's another way of collateral damage. It's like, oh, they use human shields, we don't. The good guys never do.
Even people like Madeleine Albright and Dick Cheney often said, and I remember Dick Cheney said something similar to this. We all know Madeleine Albright's famous quote saying 500,000 Iraqi kids starving to death was worth it. And then Dick Cheney his philosophy was if you kill 15 innocent civilians but you get the terrorist leader, it was worth it. He gave a speech that was kind of similar to that. Yeah. But that's collateral damage. The guy, can you imagine the insane meltdown, which I think would be deserved, to be honest, if Putin did say this. Like if Putin says, if we kill 15 Ukrainian civilians for one dead Azov battalion member, I think that's worth it. Like I was like, bro, I don't know about that, bro. And that'll be worth it. But that is literally the ideology of Dick Cheney and Madeleine Albright.
honestly, Nick, that's the ideology of the United States police state because they don't give a shit about those kids in Texas dying. They're going to pretend that they do, but they're collateral damage of a political economy that's based on the profit off of death. This country profits off of death. They don't invest in things that create life. They invest in things that prolong a death because they're going to make a lot of money off of that.
Well said. I'm gonna try and read the last two, and then we got to wrap up. It was a long stream, but I used to have fun on Saturday. There's a lot of breakdown. Hopefully, you guys learned a lot. There's a lot to talk about. So last, I then left off at. You guys know this. Anyone know this new one they use because the Ukraine one? Weapons is lethal aid now. So instead of just saying we sending weapons, even that small, I think like lethal aid isn't good either, right?
It's an oxymoron. It sounds like an oxymoron. Like lethal aid. So we're gonna help you kill.
Look, lethal aid doesn't even sound good, but this is how much they propagandize people. They can't even say they're sending weapons. Lethal aid is not even that much of an improvement, but they can't even give an inch. They can't even be a little bit truthful, right?
There's slingshots, I guess. I don't know.
And the last one's funny. They posted this when this was happening. When the Azov battalion surrender, you had massive Ukrainian people surrender, and instead of the mainstream media just admitting, because remember we talked about before the propaganda they was trying to present that Russia was losing the war, so they couldn't ever say that. They could never report on Russia winning battles and taking territories. So when they was surrendering, they was like, "Oh, the Azov battalion, the Ukrainian forces evacuated the area." And there was one headline that even said they was evacuated. Like I don't remember exactly which one because I saw one of my mutuals highlighted. And they was like, evacuated by who, motherfucker? The Russians evacuated them, meaning they surrendered to the Russians. So that's one funny because that's the most recent one that people caught up on.
We evacuated Afghanistan really well too.
Exactly.
We won and then we evacuate. Vietnam, we win and we evacuate.
Yes, because that's literally the point I've been making. I've been trying to tell you guys we have not won any war. And guys, when I was in the process of decolonizing my mind, that I remember that first that blew my mind. I was like, what? Because when I was learning to school, I thought we won all the wars. Like I thought we won all of them. And that's guys, don't judge me too hard. This is when I was like a kid and teenager. I was like, damn man, America, we badasses, man. We win all the wars. Nah. Our modern military have not won a war since when? When our last victory? Like real victory?
World War II.
I think that's accurate. World War II that was really won by the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I mean, we were part of a crew. I was about to say it was like a crew of people coming together.
We lost the Korean War. That's why there's two Koreas. The Korea War was trying to have a unified capitalist Korea. The fact that there's two Koreas made me lost. We literally try to turn Vietnam to a puppet neoliberal state. We lost. The goal was to fight the war against terror so we can get rid of terrorism. Al Qaeda and many terrorist cells expanded after the war on terrorism. The same way drug uses went up during the war on drugs. That's a little bit different than the rest of them. But you guys know my point. We don't ever achieve our geopolitical accomplishments. But I will end here because we literally about perfectly 3 hours in. I appreciate you joining me, Carl. I'm gonna give you last words. Like, you want to add something to that?
I was going to say, let's not forget that war is one of the major profit producing industries that you can invest in if you're a nation state, right? You can make a lot of money off of war. That's why we have so many wars. Win or lose is irrelevant. How much money did you make off the war? That's what matters.
Well said, my friend. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. It was a long one, 3 hours. So I can do JRE time. 3 hours, nothing. 3 hours, nothing. I'm a beast. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. But big shout out to everyone who watched the whole damn thing. I know you guys like to pop in now every once in a while. But please like the stream. Please subscribe if you're new, and join us on Patreon. We got a lot of great plans coming this summer, and by showing support to the channel, we are able to help expand our network. CJ even talking about like we are currently discussing like possibly even doing like tours. Because people have been like doing public speaking events, like these are the kind of things we want to do, but we are a proletariat network, guys. Like we don't have the resources that Breaking Points and a lot of the other places have. So the more support we get, like guys, you're gonna see RBN do a lot of cool projects if we can get that. So all our content is free either way. It's just solidarity. That's all it is. So Carlos, any last thing you want to say? Anything you want to promote?
No,
you gotta do this soon. It's always fun talking to you.
You do great work. Honestly, if you can support RBN, and in terms of those tours, maybe we can get you to our college, at least 2 or 3 of you to come talk about the work you're doing. That'd be kind of cool.
Well said. Thank you, Carlos. We gotta have you back on very soon. I think JB will be back tomorrow with the JB show. He had a hiatus last week, and then Nick and CJ show will be on Monday. You guys know we upload